The birth and death of a complete and total fool. 10, 11, 2012. The birth of the fool 1. The birth of the fool 1 is revealed to the public community and preserved online in its sufficient enough final, completed, and perfected form, given to the rest of the world just as I determinedly intend its authority to be, without any desire for royalty or even of the risk over the very book's capable exploitation and defraudable piracy by some third-hand derision. If then, so let it be. Each and every body that I affirm and desire still knows well enough the true authorship of this work, until the end, the truthlessness of its originality, creativity, power, and genius is not available to the vile, neither are such peculiar terms remotely perceptible to their plasticity. The youthfulness and golden inexperience of this work, in particular, is here dedicated to any remaining alive, warm, and friendly body. Until the end, that does give a damn that I existed, and had so lived fundamentally, essentially, and intellectually all the way, and selflessly pursued the extreme delimitation of a human intellect, of knowledge, of wisdom, only to ultimately prove to such others, clearly and appropriately enough, that of a total, entire, and complete moral experience, either for the tame and civil never to learn into the direction that I myself had once lived, or always to affirm, acknowledge, embrace, and experience the formal, strong, moving, and ultimate actuality of a man, as capable to acquire into any such body, insofar as he or she does signify the appropriate genus, specification, substance, and formality, that of which produces that golden scarlet dawn of God's creation. Once again, at last, to afford some experience worthy and valuable enough for him not to hasten forthwith his ever-impending irritability, impatience, and irrational desire to inflame, succumb, and annihilate his otherwise excessively pusillanimous, insignificant, and tedious emulative forms of the material phenomenal experience, in memorial of the commencement of the final absolution, October 2006 to October 2009, October 11, 2012. 10/12/2012, the final testament. October 12, 2012, note 1. The professed aim to finish the editorial work of this particular writing is to be forever incomplete, most significantly concerning the article entries posterior to 15, the isolated ascetic mystic. The intention to complete this task has thoroughly physically exhausted me by now. There is to follow as a result, after the former article entry demarcation, a very peculiar method and terminology of logic and intellect. However, I do not inhere any notable value or desire in the labor, refinement, or perfection of this moral experience any more. Let this lengthy and gruesome work be put to rest by now, as it should be done, as it is to be done. October 12, 2012, note 2. The article entries included in this writing, of which they altogether constitute more or less the remaining written corpus of my own literature experience prior to the birth of the full one, formal creative stage, with simplicity demonstrates the most protestant, disputable, argumentative, controversial, youthful, inexperienced, and thereby discreditable and dismissive intellectual ideas of my historical identity. Therefore, I almost completely dismiss the majority of the contents myself by now. I do not even inherit any much interest whether these such ideas ultimately signify and denote the formal essence of my own final misunderstood character, intellect, as any legitimate, authentic, sufficient, and appropriate research into the fundamental essentiality concerning the final state of my own metaphysical, speculative, principled condition proves to the understanding subject of an otherwise tremendously excessive force and desire concerning such character, intellect, directed onto the farthest opposite determined transcendental methodological intellectual formalization. August 25, 2012, note. Over the past several days, I have worked with a severe meticulousness on assembling together, oftentimes during periods of hours on end, with one particular session, of which the final 24 hours I had hardly rested in between during the task, to the total indifference and disinterest of my bodily condition, going hungry and sleepless, aching uncomfortably for my body's muscular system, where I was editing and perfecting to present here at last as many of the old, final, curious, and rather strange writings that I could find from my earlier writing career, particularly pulling together the 5 preliminary poetics, as I like to term them, the 28 preliminary proses, again, as I wish it, along with 18 extraneous thoughts, which includes some thought writing during just before the credible literary career had legitimately initiated 9 conversations between friends during the time that the concept of depth was finally found and credibility reassessed. Some of the goofiest of horror stories written during well before August of 2006, likely sometime more or less during 2003, 2004. An incredibly overlooked, dismissible, and absurd time for my character in its perspective. As it goes for the preliminary proses, these are written from more or less early January of 2006 and finished around July of 2006. These represent for the most part utter abominations, very unrefined, still mostly juvenile reasoning, but there are still plenty of cursory seeds and potentiality toward the more or less refined, God-discerning philosophy that would later come into full bloom over the finishing course of the year. I must admit the editorial work on every one of these writings, particularly the proses and poetics, was wholly fanatic, licensed and very liberal, to possibly even the most far-fetched original source radically transformed process. I needed to do this, I simply reasoned with severe stubbornness and without waver, to finally correct and overcome all the very youthful and juvenile intentions that were simply in need of wiser and fuller philosophy, than which the matter, concepts, and logic apart of my mind now were simply not available to the writer of most of these entries at their times. The poetics were some of the oldest of my contrived, authentic attempts to set into writing some of the parts of my earliest acceptable political philosophy, however inexperienced and laughably world ignorant its intentions were, along with a few silly themes that make up the topics of the last couple poetic works. Again, excessively liberal license is utilized throughout every one of these works, as it were, to correct and justify the subconscious aspects of my mind that do in fact make credible sense and possess a truthfulness to their logic that should not be denied, but only that these subconscious aspects in nearly every one these preliminary writings, and in so many parts of the individual works themselves, contain what I like to term matter and material interference, that is, error and mistake in dialectic and reasoning, error and mistake in linguistic intention or delivered effects, caused in part by glaring inexperience, vain youthful ambition. The aspects were still without thorough working out of the very many amounts and all sorts of chaotically unordered political, philosophical, spiritual, artistic ideas that were very haphazard, vibrantly juggled about in my mind during the hectic heydays of the very illegitimate, shallow, and wholly love-denying 2005, early 2006 stage, with a confessed embrace for some of the silliest and always blatantly imitated hardest principles in ethics, which during editings of so many of the early passages I found between many of the lines all these hilarious subconscious references and instant deliberate cover-ups of the most flaccid yet most macho forms of homosexuality that I could even fathom. The case was truly weird, and thankfully for my reputation and sanity, I later finally opened up to femininity, to spirit and holy water, in the general occult Kabbalistic sense of the word. Otherwise, I couldn't imagine what my drive and direction in life would become like without any divergence and a thorough reanalysis, reformation of my will, character, and intellect, that fortunately for my sake had taken even more fuller and clearer shape during middle to later 2006, August of 2006 being the point of no return. That my absurd and imitatively shallow past could not legitimately be felt or rationalized with clarity, conviction, and truth any more, as I finally learned to tread, with the greatest fear, yet with love, the waters of the great feminine abyss. To one's either likely dismay or curious intrigue, the contents of this entire entry total up to more than 70 pages. Therefore, I truly doubt for now that any reader will give enough effort to read this final message from the past in any sufficient completion. However, I preserve this writing as clearly as I can, so that any one can come by and read parts of it from time to time, to take in and leave off a thorough study or casual entertainment with it. Much of the silliness of the early writings are either wholly obscured and sadly lost, or downplayed with their effect, simply for the editing process had inevitably turned this very characteristic aspect of these early writings out this way. Otherwise, if left unedited, my philosophical reputation would easily be dismissed. I don't even know where this reputation stands to others, even in the present era of my life, but I do think it is safe enough to assume that it is standing along more or less some legitimate enough or acceptably understood grounds. I don't receive much feedback to begin with, hardly any at all in relation to my writings or more discerned thoughts. But I continue to strive moreover with my passion, of which writing is indeed desirable to me, enough to forever pursue with my motivation. I may likely need to commence a third book after this entry, as I do add every writing entry to my book, that of which I am currently undergoing the compilation of a second book, The Birth of the Fool II, after which this entry is added will easily account to beyond 800 pages. As of October 12, 2012, I don't wish my books to see them become very bulky. Even so, they are spiritually symbolic and committed to hidden reasoning. Right now, the second book appears practically and ideally near to its completion. The third book should likely be entitled The End of the World, for a simple yet endlessly reiterative reason that I cannot here describe. 5 Preliminary Poetics. 1. Scream, my heroes, for new life. 2 millenniums of my toleration. Endless suffering, pray for old. Legislation, lawsuits pave the way. New world order comes to rise. Empire of my fathers gone. Land is dominated by the corrupt. Subservience, they plead, to the poor and pitiful. Everyday virtue does dominate. Love the neighbor, give charity. I spit upon this idea. I worship my might. Then democracy overtakes the world. Mediocre men are superior. Dull masses have the power, holding the key of death. Silencing of individual thoughts. Vulgar talk of my enemies gone. Worship the foe, for he is right. You are the ones we hate. Where is Nietzsche? Where is this philosophy of preservation? Feel the wind that endless fathers breathe. Call for the families to return. The propaganda worsens. I am forever hated. Despise honor, singularity, hatred of my savior. Speak of his name and face death, forced to hermit's life. Speak of might and dignity, face mutilation and torture. Lovers of humane treatment, kindness to enemies. Let them walk over you, stab your neck, run on through the crowds. They kill for your looks. They preach for submission. They love the repugnant. Love the empire, love the state. What is the use? Change it all, make it inferior. My expectation gags. Into the abyss I feared for. Gone is the right, gone is the strong. Out comes human mediocrity. Standards set at 0. One on one you fear and cower. Realize you're pitiful. Hide in the masses, hide in the herd. Overpower my mind. Start the slow process. Suck away at the roots. Tear at the chaff. Rip away the settlement. Scream at the rally. Bring upon raw emotion. Hatred of the intellect. Correct logic trashed into mud. Think you are of blood. It is the only common ground. Everything else even simpler. Nothing to relate. Long dreams of ancient Grecia. The Senate and people of Imperial Rome. The Senate and people of Imperial Roma. Romantic master spirits. Hatred of eternity. Too much to calculate. What does it represent? Specialized in nothing. Worth only a fraction. Certainty marks autocracy. Dubiety marks democracy. A final solution marks the man. Infinite problems of infinite men. Talk to one's ideas. Add another human. Conscious for remaining respect. Genuine, distinct ideas lost. Heart over mind. See it is your mistake. Aroused by superficiality. Dead decor ideology. Setting of lateral sights. Unable to see above. Everything valued. Grind to a lesser answer. Hate the other gods. Love of all modernity. Temporary ideas take control. All that evolves no longer needed. Information age. Everywhere it is seen. Lies, brainwashing, mediocrity, never self-thinkers. Impossible forever to seize control. Pound my thoughts into the dust. Endless hate spews at me. Intolerant only of the unique. Now my mark is invisible. Pass upon the rally. Always at the top of my world. Not even existent in theirs. Intolerant of few matters. Problem is the few matters corrupted. into the spirit of eternal hatred. Being diminishes with every new grub. Call upon the graves that exist. Ancient corpses tell such stories. Peaceful times and festivals assured a secure existence. Return to the market. Hear the voice of the modern man. Tower of Babel. Incompetent speech. Trained to conform to vanity. Notice my grim, wrought expression. Take note, I sneer at a grub. Off my head they begin to chant. I understand their ways. He screams for self-respect. They never desire me. Soon the instigator destroys the mind. Label of a genocidal sadist. Take me to their throne. Court, they call it. I wait my death. Punishment and sentence given. The axe to my head is what I expect. Soon I learn their frailty. As I murder 1,000 men, I'm caught and punished. They now give a jail sentence and bail to send. So I murder 1,000. So I murder 1,000 grubs. Sentence and punishment given. I'm tortured by demons, cut into pieces, no more man. December 28, 2005. 2. Put an end to the cult. What is eternity? What is perpetuity? Abnormal definitions of strength. 2086 of the Common Era. Western Europa plummeted. End is drawing nigh. Higher self and being. Look below. What do I see? A mass of stupidity. He preaches for love and submission. All I say to him is, I see what my senses foretell. I see an enemy attack. Will to power, will to strength. What is the use anymore? What is the truth now? Total respect. Death to the custom of man. Cut the trees, cover the soil. Forced annihilation. Final days of the air I breathe. Smog and dirt inhalation. What is culture? What is knowledge? Landscapes of glass and concrete. On the streets, forever lost. Fights and murders and reefers. I thus preach for the end, to put an end to the cult. International total worldly states. Unstoppable power. Forced to deny my seed. Only option I may choose. Rest scattered throughout. If only I have ever known. Rational philosophy. Master morality. So little, few, and so rare. Meet a comrade. Chances are rare as finding a god. A criminal king invades my throne. Ratio surpasses belief. He says to wait for him to come. He shall respond to the mass destruction. For with this event, the heroes no chance. Only for I have sinned, the unpardonable. Respond in hate, reply in angst. You are the king of fools. Because of this death, discarded perspective, it is inevitable, it is rational. You are the ignoramus. I reply, what does it matter? 1 or 1,000,000 to perish. Claim the throne again, forever stuck. Radical contention of the West. No more home, no more peace. Move throughout the entire place. What can be done? My death be done. Return to the nature of man. Nature of man. Custom of old. New world order, false and dead. Secure the existence for land and people. Never to fear my demise. Marx is wrong. Nietzsche is right. Worship the other gods. Hail victory. What matters most? The ultimate belief. To fight for the security of my life. December 29, 2005. 3. I'm hatred, seeping blood. Every answer is solved. You doubt evermore what led to it. Put it behind, resolve your memory. Pretend the opposite is correct. Shun the true solutions, only for the sake of hate. Grow more the believers of false. Look at the damage you've done. Hollow inside, empty of thought. Look past what's true. Trouble and decision, problem and choice. Cannot you find what's right? Purposeful hindrance of your truest power. Throw it behind your back. Replace it new with a postmodern custom. Way that fails the test. The test of time. Will it subside? My solution hasn't. 5 or so years, give it the most. Up shall sprout a new sensation. Grab the hand of whatever attracts. Impulse that rules your mind. Same that goes for the way of thought. Do not see past the image. Join the thugs. Rob a bank. Scorn of the earth, unite. Running wild is what you pray. Gone forever, I wish you well. Problems with the ruling men. Love the scorn I speak. Plead them for truth. I am the public enemy. Laugh, mock, whip their minds. When will the fools perish? Never will is what's assumed. Longest journey ahead. Into the heart of ignorance. Souls of love and fear. Love the enemy, let him win. Masochistic dreams. All I know is hateful hate. Hate monger I am. Go to hell, he screams at me. Hate, 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 hate. You are wrong, the king of fools. I love more than you. You lie with the scorn of earth. I fight for the truth. Eyes beset at the bottom degree. Lowbrow beast you are. Stare at the muddy depths. Can't you see? Will you raise your sights? Feed on the superstition. Politicians forever confused. Claim to know the whole of truth. March unto my death I watch. Lovers of the world and worldly. Remaining individuals grasp. Censure books of spoken truth. Same cynic as I. In the end only time will tell who was right and wrong, live and dead. You are one with me, but I am certain of reason. December 29, 2005. 4. Living in the world of castles and pastures. What is this world I live in, full of humane respect? I want a world so full of hatred. Fear for your life. I must battle. Castles plot the landscapes in amidst the green pastoral hills. Scarlet suns, clean crisp air. Plate mail, helmets worn by men. The women are so beautiful. Pretty white blouses cloak their breasts. Blonde hair flowing in the winds. Menders of the battling sword. What is this world I live in, full of commercials and cars? I want a world so full of wood, stones and bricks galore. Walk upon the cobbled path, Mjolnir hangs from necks. Transylvanian dungeons, full of instruments of torture of the pitiful, the modern world once loved. Here in my kingdom you lose forever, liberal thinking extinguished. Praise of autocracy, hail the dictatorship. You, the feeblest of men, have you not learned yet the ways of the old? Straighten that wrist, you sis. Why, though, am I stuck in this world? Nowhere do these thoughts exist. Forced to humaneness, washed and loved. Everywhere I go, technology. In the horror of equal men, forced to submit my honor to them in any war or craft I join. I want a world so full of fear. Fear of few men themselves. Create an image, hail their names. Worship the gods of Norse. Never submit to another man, lest I say to a sis, throw me south and sodomize. This is the feeling I get. Jousting returns, nights of fight, wrath of our lives for fun. We are the strong, we scare the Christus. Off with his head, we win. Spit on the church remains, turn the cross down, invert it. We don't need your morals, we don't need your God. We are Ubermensch of the highest order. What are these thoughts I'm seeing? Pop and hip-hop and beats, splatters of color, lines and scribble, cast of retards, I think. Into the mist my horse and I roam, no spirit within miles, free to live wherever I rest, wanderer of all eternity. Meet a maiden, love her to death. Never will a man love a sis. I have the instruments prepared for him. Meet me in my dungeon tonight. Passing the stage of temporary sensation, all that exists defined, find for ages, been around forever, prove correct time and again. Hear the sound of perfect silence, ringing in my ear I get. Never or ever has the modern man heard the sound of pure nature. Forget the stock market, forget the grubs. All I do see is pure bliss. Full after feasts, live at my homestead, purely mine and theirs. Forget this world I live in, nothing in store for me. If ever I share the lifestyle once lived, you will beg for mercy. Shout in joy, cry in angst, wish you had seen it sooner. For now I look at the world, what have you done? It will never return, you fool. December 29, 2005. 5. We hate the masses, fear us, the individuals. Pitiful modern man, go to the concert, hop and skip. Why does the industry love him? Sell out bands or sensation. Simple guitar and beats, 4-chord riffs, vocals of song, not even hearty, try to appeal to everyone. Does not he understand that one music is not for all? Try to bring the genre to light, concept forever construed. Worship morals, worship females. Love songs that don't interest us. Take out grandeur, deny double mortality, attracted to kind and foolish things. He, the limp wrist, shall not have us. He fails our respect. Fear the power, fear the gods, hatred of anything national. His music television tortures us. We revel in rabies. Fear it when he meets us. You will not make it out alive. Torture, pop, torment, grunge, make the youth a rabid weapon. Have them prepare. Hate them for it. Darkness rules again. I don't want your respect. I don't want your love. I want the soft to fear us, worship us, cry for us. Individual power, titanic genius, curse of the masses, foolish, can't win. Bow to the hate, fools of prey. You know we are right. Hail the night, hail the wolves, nocturnal expeditions and quests, armor of chains, corpse paint, swords, free to torment the soul at will. For what has it done to us? It cannot repay in full. Spread the dogma past the means, he will kiss our feet. Black death, thrash metal lives. Everywhere you are, you hear it. The herds of humane men bow to our feet. Gone are the pop sensations. Masculine men, strength and might, work for total preservation. Secure the existence of life through metal. Vikings Norway turns again. Into the abyss go the old ideas of pop and glamour. We are ugly, fearsome beasts. Love it, kill them for our land. Xxiii and wild hunt. The myths come alive. In our dreams we have once thought. Now the truth exists. Everywhere so brutal, fierce and hard. Wotan smiles at us. Possessed by a virtuoso of the other gods. Habitat changes for all time. December 30, 2005. 28 preliminary proses, with prose 27 documented elsewhere before. 1. On individual, eccentric, rejected appearances. Where are the individuals in the current times of the Western world? Where are the madmen, the geniuses, the eccentrics, the outcasts, the ones rather well maintained and healthy, but rejected by the mainstream populace? These questions can be answered by the individuals ourselves, who state to the masses that we do, in fact, exist. Yet we still refuse to live the same way as you do, or to accept your ideas and philosophies. Who are individuals? Geniuses, madmen, anyhow. What do they want from you, the masses? Study them by yourselves, without the usual assistance of a large group. Talk to them and get them to reason their thoughts and eccentricities. Who am I, might you ask? I'm all the categories that makes up a rejecter of the herd mentality. I am an individual, a solitary, yet I'm a maniacal genius, an insane madman, for if you listen to me speak, you'll find out immediately that I'm not one of you. I'm yet a follower of the collective conscience of the true masses. However, I fail to conform to your thinking patterns, especially now. In the minds of true madmen, you will find the ultimate and most important need of the man to express himself in the most extreme fashion. Currently, this includes classic biker jackets, black clothes, patches, badges, gun belts, corpse paint, long hair, inverted crosses, pentagrams. The list seems to go on. This makes up the image of the self-expressive individual of classic early black metal, and I give gratitude to those who are fearless enough to walk the streets with that attire. What is even more expressive of madmen and individual self-thinkers is the attire of the Norse Viking pagan, seen in promotional photos with long beards, swords, Mjolnir necklaces, chain mail, maces, clubs, helmets, etc. The most extreme fashion expressions are the ones that become militaristic and totalitarian. You masses, are the ones that hate us. Not because that our attire may consist of high shock value or is truly hateful looking. No, it is because we do not conform to the postmodern, everyday, standard form of plain clothing and boring appearances. We simply stand outside of the group's appearance. The group is the state. The rejecter is the Satanist, the Viking, the nationalist, the warrior. A holy desire for a takedown of absent hierarchy and rank, and for the reinstallation of the monarchy, aristocracy, peasantry, etc., once more throughout everywhere that applies, the individuals benefits the writer. For if it so happens with the ranks, that with the aristocracy that represents the individuals, that have a higher value than the peasants, which is easily observable, whereas nowadays the masses are thought to be equal to individuals, If it so happens, this overall emotional standard of feeling and thought as well by the geniuses and outsiders will subside and have total freedom to express in the most horrendous fashion the non-trend and altogether extreme form of attire to the peak of its intensity, although it may fade and fall back toward more mainstream standards once this peak has been reached. January 9, 2006. 2. To rid the Western nations of wrong and variations on wrong ideas and philosophies. I always knew in the hearts of the masses that they did not truly enjoy the modern, everyday talk of politicians in the Western world. How the politicians would bore the masses to tears with trivial conversations, twisting out of the concrete before it dries and hardens, escaping the blame and accusation made by the press and others. The masses don't truly want this. What they really seem to want, although how frightening this would be, is the freedom of the chains of years and millenniums of work and struggle for order and balance, but not submitting to the king, ruler, or law. This creates chaos. In most of the forms it is democracy, though the chaos right now in the Western world has not peaked in its inevitable disaster just yet, though it will. While the forms of chaos are the Western nations that exist today, they are the ones that seem to permit discourse of reason by the uneducated and incompetent, furthering the future to more incorrect legislation. Although this discourse of reason may appear positive to the unwary, it is the fact that it permits the false and incorrect side of doctrines to enter debate with its cunning and clever disguises of philosophy that make it seem correct to the amateur or foolish, or even in some or many cases to professionals. In every argument spectrum, there is a right side and a wrong side, with many smaller variations of the right side, and with many smaller variations of the wrong side. In the current times, we are constantly getting legislation and arguments full of these minute variations of right and wrong, sometimes even the truly wrong side as well. But never do we see the true and correct side of the argument, for what sadly comes with correctness is but to the masses too much for energy and emotional drive that they simply don't have. Energy. It takes a true emperor and no smaller rulers below him to get things done in the correct fashion. So many things, the ideas and legislation that have been dormant for so many years, that to get them all done overnight will cost the output of the masses to dwindle to the point of absolute exhaustion, possibly even fatigue-induced death to whatever amount of them. Emotional drive. What the masses are required to have of emotion, which they do not actually have, is replaced by the emotions of senile happiness and bliss. For no matter how ridiculous the circumstances of the nation may be, what is needed by them is the ability to love certain things and ideas, whatever these seem to be to the creators, to hate certain things and ideas to the fullest of their potential. When this happens, we see the new will of the folk on a mission to change back to the ways of correct values and philosophies, not these everyday, passing-by morals and nihilistic ways of feeling overall. Truly what it is the gathering of dormant personality of archetypes and archetypal times into the collective body of the masses, in that these personal feelings make no hindrance in getting even the most sinister and evil feeling things done and finished, though of course they are not sinister or evil to those who are individuals and genius, the overman of the current times of postmodern thinking. It is done, then. The waves have returned. No more do these democracies reign, wherein good ideas once in a while come into politicians' views and come to pass immediately in a couple of years, only to have the false and incorrect ideas and doctrines come into legislative view for the next couple of years, for the cycle moves on and on. January 9, 2006. 3. On breaking past the hastily made New World Order customs. What is philosophy today? What are the standards of philosophy? And if they are low, then how did this kind of philosophy come to move in on the ways of thinking? No, it is not the making of it by the masses. It is in fact the making of it by activities that have been used for propaganda, for things they, the politicians, say have termed terrible, atrocious, abominable. But to clear, more wholesome eyes, with minds willing to think critically and not be motivated by superficial responses, they see immediately that the politicians fear for the state of modern, current conditions and customs, and not for anything that belongs to the truth, or that has been evolving for the past millenniums. They want to see the temporary states and establishments that have been defined not by time tests, but by incomplete thought and imagination, thinking it as a utopia, not knowing it as a utopia, for it is not. In reality, once put into practice, they find their ways of romance and supreme bliss not to work, especially for the true inhabitants. Yet, of course, they are sneaky and don't like the blame placed on them, so they either deceive the masses into thinking it is still an okay state, or they place the blame on the historical past, saying how dull and boring, or how vicious and cruel it had used to be. Nonsense, state the individuals and men who have stepped out of the box of narrow-minded and herd-like thinking, and they come to desire and salivate over anything new that has any affiliation with the past life of rich, elaborate, and ornate ways of art, or mathematical, logical ways of thinking, etc., executed with hard emotion. I always wished for the ways of old to return. I believe that the masses, or at least the true masses, wish for it back, but are rather fearsome to go all the way, for fear it should claim the lives and turn away the curious and naive when they happen to step too far out of the boundaries of what politicians and propaganda and ministers decide to state as normal. They simply do not get used to this way of thinking and lifestyle. Another reason is it is a dangerous lifestyle, in that the unwary and deniers of the philosophy and proposed utopia will do anything to get in the way of the curious person's life and threaten it, or even take it by physical means if the amateur believer goes too far in front of the fools. What is the use anymore? The thinking man thinks. The thinking man asks. It will never return, he says, but it is the fact that one man left alone in a population of almost total non-believers can potentially turn the situation onto its exact opposite. When he dies, he has converted followers, though they are few, but they are the followers that believe and grow stronger as the generations pass, and within time, though it may be long, the followers have enough willpower to seize control of the government or governments of whatever nation it be, for there are enough believers now during this time. Belief in the past will always scare the masses off. This is why in this age the fall and collapse hasn't yet changed. Alongside this, there is media, my friend, which congests and consumes the masses with the lies and temptation of the New World Order nonsense. Things like that it is necessary to love your neighbor, that it is considered acceptable to give him charity if poor, etc. Love your neighbor? Hating him causes the masses to throw rocks at your window and spread rumors. You soon have them threatening the individual's life. One hates him because he has nothing in common with you, and is an antagonist. The fact is that one is different evidently enough that he does not get along with him. If one's friends were different, that possessed nothing in common with each other, firstly, they wouldn't understand themselves, they wouldn't speak a simple common language. This is the first argument that men are at certain instances not wholly similar enough with one another to form a sufficient friendship, that they need some similarity, or as such, it would not be possible to even ask credibly and without a severe awkwardness, "How are you doing?" And that besides this, they must find some common ground, or otherwise quickly lose interest and search elsewhere for communion. It is by nature's reason that she causes them to part ways and lose interest. They become restless and do not connect. They claim the declining experience illogical and have reason to throw it out. On a greater note, it is all the more necessary for the masses to get past the temporary stage of swiftly and hastily made customs of the New World government and fall back onto the ranks that have been marching along ever since the new thinking had come about. In all, through and through, we believe in power. Power that shall give us the chance to break past that gruesome media and the corrupt, shallow, and superficial propaganda machine. In essence, it is I, the individual, that we shall believe in. I praise you. January 9, 2006. 4. I shout for love, too, as they do not know. Who understands individuality these days, and who nurtures it? In the cosmic scale, everyone is dust and dead, but is it possible to etch a man into the universe for everlasting eternity when looked upon in history? No, not within the processes used in postmodern democracy can this happen, for the ruler is 500 too many. Who remembers 500 names? Why should one have 500 rulers anyhow? One is sufficient enough, though it is the foolish that claim these people serve the good by ideal thinking, though could it possibly be that every once in a while the ideal may be wholly wrong? Right now it certainly is. It has been for years now. If the ideal were the opposite, wherein the right and correct philosophy was maintained by only one for everlasting eternity, it would be possible that the modern humaneness would never exist, that the common pity that the common pity, morals, and charitable feelings would not be seen today, that the ranks of and order would exist securely throughout the concerned Western Empire that I am speaking of. I have forever longed to see this change take place. In the eternity of time, we know one that sees with value in what is important, which is certainly not a value in the zeros. What are these people that see differently? Back in the ages long since past, this was nearly every one. These times, now very few. The individuals, the visionary thinkers, prominent thought patterns. In essence, these are rare. Prominent thought patterns of what by these few and so special? These are grounded toward history and longing for love, division, and death. To see change, but when so, not to see change, to permanent security. Infection of the whole, of the general. This general to them is sufficient enough. To us it is stupid and the fruit and base of all emasculated population. Why then does this infection exist? Only for the sake of their security. The security is not for us. Then make the security for us. How so? By breaking barriers of moral, foolish respect and love. Form with fear and hatred. Maintain love and respect for the right and necessary things, not for the dirt of the earth or the poor or for the criminal-minded proletarians. Instead, install for them an ungodly fear, but when faced with confrontation, have them rabid for the deletion of parasites, for they know now that it otherwise causes the apocalypse. The pity for the unfamiliar and the societal masses. I shout for love, too, as they do not know, but not for love or random outpourings of unchecked liberty. Not everything within the whole world, or things without a certain sense of skill or gift within the talents, but rather for the land and people and ideas that are helplessly within a process of deterioration and annihilation ever so long. If opposed, stopped, and successfully reversed, face the peak of evolution. Climax. A downfall will eventually occur, perhaps since the cycle has already spun its wheel. This shall occur but recover itself. This does not matter, for what happens, happens. Dangerous to common grounds is the idea for love of injustice toward common grounds. But what changes the common grounds of aristocratic principles and rank will turn these principles toward love of the lowest degree, and few ever higher. The finished idealism of aristocracy. Down with this, race their existence, they say. Up with the base proletarians, the many, the herd, the stupid, the bovine. They make progress. They invent truth. Rather, it is the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy that make the legitimate process of solid evolution and right, worthy innovation. They are the ones that are naturally allowed to control, as much as they wish, the legislation, which any fundamental or elaborate changes to it are not even needed, although they of course occur, for not all the noble thoughts are intelligent. These are the ones without the conscience of herd thinking, that are better able to reason about the future, and to possess a realistic picture of what 500 years or so from now will look like economically, socially, politically, ideally, et cetera. With the absence of verbal dialogue, they are without radically different and less abstract principles, which causes during eras the ability to take ideas to the fullest potential. For the imagination of one is not the imagination of 20. The 20 have different views, depending on who is more persuasive and agreeable. If the judgment be the less abstract and great, there is the end of the finer man's vision toward great innovation and construction, art, religion, science. If it be a written submission of literary ideas, the judgment apparently goes for whatever perspective best articulates and is most literally powerful and impressive, whether this be an ultimately creative or an ultimately destructive perspective. The more complicated, and the truly better idea itself, the creative vision will lose, only if it is not sufficient enough to understand, or if it is not appealing to the masses in a convicted way. I spit upon this outlook, this fatalist Weltanschauung, for it is no more than unfair scheme. They shout back that life is not fair, though I respond, if it needs be unfair, but if the improvement and evolution of human reason be possible for better and less postmodern, ultimately communist outlook, then I always uphold my advocacy for it. I praise genius. January 11, 2006. 5. On woman. Woman can be puzzling, hard to find out. What is her goal? Why does she exist? Why is she here? One finds similarities and differences physically, mentally, emotionally. She shies away from pessimism, talks swiftly, without fixed conviction. She is a master of the bed, a master of sensuality, sight, sound, smell. Truly, woman loves man more than she loves reasoning. What about other animals? Spiders, ants, bees. Where is the reason? Lowering the level of the man, the heightening of the level of the woman, the twain leveling out to a supposed middle. Nihilistic perspective comes into place. A collapse of movements, postmodern art and music, atonality, total serialism, jungle beats, viruses, ionization. The philosophy of mankind, from respect for man, for individuality and reason, to the invention of communism and massive victory over the bourgeois ideas. Since great art and reason are not any more respected, out with the door go the old ways. There becomes a competition of the forces. Killing occurs, hatred and pessimism. This is how he is seen as now. It progresses to the bitter end, ever worse in the future. In essence, man's art and philosophy are incomparable amongst the more irrational forces of nature. The new and modern as truly degenerate and inferior. We know our behavior, thoughts are forced into the back row and kept silent, if used, for example, then only as reason to hate them, and throw them into the mud even more, although it does not matter whether it is truly better than what is popular and perceived in the now. January 11, 2006. 6. What is what? What is Western now, Plato? When does it come time that even the members of the Western Empire spit at the word Western, at the throne of all high matter? What is high matter? It can be a living entity as well, needless to say, as that of a cosmos or galaxy. These are synchronized with the rhythm of a natural cycle, perceived by all things that maintain their freshness. What is freshness? How does one maintain their freshness? It is not by loving what may take place in the currents, for both good or bad may exist, but by the waves of the Atlantic. It is by seeing the water rather than the oil. What is oil? Oil is all that tilts the balance in favor of the water's corruption, in the human sense, death and destruction. What is death and destruction? It is the uprooting of things like the common man. What is he now? In the rhythm of animals, both speaking and living, this man no longer finds a shelter and a family in his territory. He is now a lost dog in the market. The market surrounds him. This grows bigger. The lost dog submits. He is one of the hustlers of the city. He knows it is a survival of most fit, a free for all, even in his own home. Where is the hero of his house from ages long since past? He is there, but only hidden. He takes great amounts of research to know more about, even more to perceive, and whatever tilts the balance in favor of things pitiful and small is to face conflict, as it decreases the progress to its opposite. The progress of music, melodies once so rich, soon lose meaning, especially their beauty. Past times of relaxation on a hill of grass in the sunshine no longer feel relaxing. Consequences enter the realm. Impure, they face absolute retribution. These followers of great ideals, to the archetypal nature of the person and collective subconscious of the will, there exists within this realm the longing for peace, not by regressing with progress, but by victory in battle, after centuries of warfare and conquering, the security of one's existence. The one is not for everybody. The one is not the other side either. He is himself, different from the rest. In essence, everything is different in his mind from others, thinking patterns, personality, etc. He deserves his existence, immortal by belief, mortal by reality. Soon the new ideas grow old and lose value, but truly it is taken by a new form of idea, still not even close to the original, the true sense of idea, the concept of what is desirable or ought to be. But what is desirable for whom? Who should the pleasure and peace go to? In the end, it depends on who is desirable over all. That is when the victor emerges, even without a drop of blood shed. It is inevitable that the victor will be the most equipped. What is prepared wins. What is unprepared loses. However, the individual tries his hardest to gain momentum. There will always be, especially now, numerous obstacles that block the path whatsoever of striding upwards toward victory. In many cases, it may be so terrible that one of the obstacles could be the written law. When this occurs, the solar individual advocates for the use of force. However, in the end, the obstacle ends up taking his life as punishment. What is his use? How can once was become once is? With the progress of years and centuries, it becomes so in the end. But overnight face death. I speak no further. January 19, 2006. 7. Nothing is beyond anything. What is beyond anything? The number 0, I see, is the only starting point of which, if wished to count further in either direction, cannot be passed up or surpassed. In effect, the first real number after 0 or before 0 is unheard of, likely only an infinitesimal decimal. It cannot be stated in words. How then can we value this number system any longer? Time and space can be measured now, since it has been realized only by the basic, rounded, and most inaccurate sense of numbers. We cannot rely on the modern clock system to tell the time, since this concept of time does not get past anything, nor does any sense of measurement in regard to length, width, height, or weight of something. If I could really get a sense of the first number after 0, it would be an infinite, endless decimal, somehow adding a series of numbers to its sign. But how could it possibly complete itself and move on? This number is always the failure to complete. Therefore, I believe it only makes sense to use measurements that corrupt with a scale of numbers, so that it is actually possible to get past anything and complete a measurement. I do not believe that the atom is the smallest actual size of a matter, for it is a notion that is supposedly false. What an atom happens to be is actually magnified even further to an infinite examination. Once the point is relatively reached, this can be magnified even further. This cycle goes on forever. If this were true, then reality would no longer be what it appears. It is now true that length measurement et cetera, that is, anything that is to be measured has to be measured to infinity. No one thing is an exact measurement. One cannot get past 0, neither forward nor back. Any sense in trying this is only a layman's attempt to use a number series by an ignorant and general means. No one thing can be pointed at by measurement, for this would be an infinite measurement of time. One does not exist, for it cannot get past anything. What is a clock anyhow? The device measures hours, minutes, seconds, but what about a true clock, one that cannot invent from human resources? A science that would measure time by infinite places after 0. But how can this be accomplished? In human sense, it appears impossible. It would never be completed. The time would never get past the first true number, the first real number. What is the first real number? How can one measure a length to its fullest correctness? It is only by the persons who are determined to add and compute with numbers that they have this involuntary duty to generalize and shorten the lengths of the accuracy of their supposed numbers and measurements. If a measurement is truly infinite, beyond measuring, in how small something can be, then the measurement is the same in how big something can be. The bigness is likewise truly infinite. Therefore, in another dimension, every molecule and sub-molecule etc. is spread out to infinity. In the physical plane, everything is general and received in appearance, as far as measurement is considered. Matter is limited and has no perpetuity. It has no perpetuity. We see ourselves as a certain height and weight. Our arms stretch out to limited points. But in a different plane or different dimension, this would be impossible, for everything in measurement would never end. If we were here to stretch throughout the universe and every molecule in it, especially the human and animal forms, since it pays particular attention to us, we and the universe, if it were to suddenly stop its expansion, would stretch out to infinity, or in other words, out to an infinite more extension in diameter than what the universe's measurement already would appear to be. But this is unclear, as this proposed different plane or different dimension does not subsist independently from phenomenal knowledge, which, if phenomenal knowledge rests beyond demonstration, nothing is eternal. January 30, 2006. On the infinity of universes. Since we Since we use most number methods and calculations in a general and incomplete way, it is assumed that every known calculation and measurement that has been completed since the dawn of mathematics and calculation has in fact been an error, a wrongdoing, a misprint, an incorrect computation. What is the thing that exists within atoms, and the thing that exists within this? If this be the case, then what exists beyond the universe? And beyond that, how is it assumed that on the day when a phenomenon dies, that its spirit goes to a place through thought heaven? For it is a likely impossibility. In fact, in the physical plane, anywhere throughout the universe and beyond, no spirit of human entities will be found outside of the captive form. Once it is dead, the release of the spirit from the physical plane within the captive form to mental or higher level astral planes away from the world seems foolish. If the spirit within does exist on a physical level, then how is the transfer a possibility? How is the spirit once non-existent without beginning to become a sole life form and then exist through all of eternity? Where does the life and the energy from the beginning of this universe begin? In essence, the question should be posed: if time does not begin or end, then exactly what exists before the birth of the universe, or what exists at the death of this universe. Therefore, I pose the stance that not only has this universe gone through a stage of birth and will go through a stage of death, but I do in fact pose the stance that there are infinite births and deaths of universes in the past, and that there are infinite births and deaths of universes in the future, or at least of a limited but great number of universe births and deaths. The question is, will every one of these life cycles of the universes experience the phenomenon of animal and plant life, of large amounts of water, and even a human life? The answer: perhaps the present universe's lifetime is one of, if not the only, time that any universe ever has a source of life, but that the infinite cycle has planets or inorganic astral bodies at the right distance from the right star in order to provide for correct temperatures, water, organic life, and so forth. These chances might prove moreover possible. January 30, 2006. Nine. Playfulness. What a humane world I live in throughout my life. Discussion about philosophy and such these days is clearly something to laugh about to the overman, the victor and destroyer of the modern taboos and fears. It is a must to maintain high art, music, science, manners, ethics, philosophical outlook, and such for the security of the Western identity in the present and for the future. It becomes fun to play with the numerous postmodern minds, to get them to cry over how cruel we can be to them, of that how we love and long to see iron maidens, stretched devices, guillotines returned from 12th century torture chambers for any subject that deviates from law, whether it be by their forming a proletarian revolt, or even by stealing a few dollars or even by stealing a few American dollars in an act of intentional criminal behavior, just for their crimes' sake. We love to prophesy how the hierarchy and our aristocracy shall return to the forefront of everyday life, how the masses will be generally returned to the natural, politically restricted classes, how we, individuals, eccentrics, geniuses, pagans, reactionary Satanists, and so forth, will be given titles of mastery over the dull and average throngs of the stupid. The debater, of course, argues back this way. He says, so is it okay to hate others? Etc. etc. It becomes all too old and predictable too quickly. I answer that I do not hate without good reason. Of course, I confuse them. They try to restate what I had said previously, but that only the statement will now be totally construed and false from what I truly propose to them. Then he plays politics, having the pestilence and vermin of the debate, then accuse the anti-moralist of all the unending questions and statements that try to make one out to appear shocking, evil, and hateful, to use his word, wherein I respond to him saying that I don't say this or that, as he wrongly supposes, wherein rather I say this or that, as what I clearly state. This goes on and on. He never wins. It is logical that violence breaks out in the peak of the arguments, always done so by the irrational fool, of course. Why does not logic, fact, deduction, intellect, and such ever go considered by the humanist? for he does not possess the well-disposed character toward it, for it is proposed because intellect leads to Holocaust. The fact that it is now justified for death camps to exist in the Western Hemisphere for the irrational and humorist thinker has changed reasonable legislation and law toward the permission of corrupt ideas into the Western world that are considered to be to the well-created, formative, some of the most contemptible, frustrated, delusional, and ultimately despicable doctrines, philosophies, and physical actions that fall onto the aforementioned Western states. So truly has intellect before the postmodern New World policy changes, before the corrupt and humanist Weltanschauung agenda legislation at Qatar led to world death and destruction? The answer is only too evident. If the empire and civilization are all too perfect, which many from history have truly been close, then use of the intellect would never reach a holocaustal states. Simply for every man, object, thought, and idea in the states would go respected and honored, with a shunning from potential corruption. Although, of course, most of the aspects of even sufficient states would still, like always, appear rather dull and stupid, require constitutional regulation to deny them from the assimilation into ultimate in principle truth. Anyhow, February 16, 2006. 10. Entering realms of astral visions during sleep. I lay down to bed with the shades drawn in total blackness. I'm completely exhausted from a hard day of work. My mind's eye drifts from vision to vision, and I hear fragments of unknown songs in my mind's abstraction. Tossing and turning for a while, I fall into a trance-like spell. My mind now focuses on an image, and travels about it in abstract spiritual realms, where all senses remain intact. My body relaxes further, and I become frozen, breathing heavily as events become more intense. I see a vision. I am in an unknown galaxy far away from modern times, though it seems familiar to Earth. I am in a forest village, high in the cold mountains. I see a girl sitting on a tree trunk, playing a melody with a wooden flute. She is dressed in brown wool-like clothing, and all around her are men dressed in similar garb, chopping down trees with saws and the like, working their jobs to construct the village and secure it from barbarian attack. My vision is in the first person, that my own form does not exist in it. I am an observer from another realm, like a ghost, where I am there existing as a person, but unable to detect. My will is in control of my vision, and I grow curious about the surroundings, and begin to walk further, deeper into the mystical sights and sounds. I enter into one of the huts, where a fire is kept. The house is wholly wooden. No one notices me. I exit and am nervous in my subconscious. I become enthralled by a lightning-fast chaser, an enemy, a horrifying demonic monster. I'm afterward in a creepy, abandoned mansion, though I am positive that the monster is lurking from every corner. I turn the corner where he catches me and squeezes out all my blood and guts. I truly feel the pain back on Earth. All of a sudden, the intellect tells me that this is just a dream, that it is not real. The result is that I come back to life with my vision and pop into another landscape and setting. The continuous process excites me, and I exit the realm, and my conscience returns back to the physical plane on Earth. As I have now woken up, it is cold in the room, the lighting is pitch black. I drift back and forth from dream sequence states of concrete consciousness. I narrate back in my mind what I witness in my dreams until it becomes light out again. I forget later most of the experiences. Right when I get out of bed in the morning, my mind is uttering sleepy, incoherent phrases that sound logical at sight, but when analyzed, turn out to be nothing but nonsense. Sometimes I hear these great, beautiful melodies that no one has otherwise heard. I intend to write them down, but they soon disappear from my conscience, never to return. February 19, 2006. 11. On sleeping, out-of-body experiences, astral traveling. Sometimes, after I've settled down to bed and have immediately closed my eyes after a hard day at work, after having been awake for a long, strenuous period of time, I see many sorts of fragments of images flashing before my eyelids. I suppose that I see the images of the day flashing back in manipulated detail, done so forth by my conscious spirits, where the images resemble my will and what I am currently willing. I feel stressed and rigid, hard as a rock, and seem to race around with thoughts and feelings and sounds in my head, mostly about the current day's work and events. but powerful memories soon to be forgotten in the distant future. I seem to toss and turn in bed for a while, and sometimes after I toss quickly to one side, a powerful image appears in my imagination. It disappears, and I'm immediately left admiring it, longing for it to return. I always love sleeping in the bedroom in absolute blackness. I like to slowly close my eyes in the darkness, where open or closed eyelids do not make any difference to the brain. As I'm familiar with my surroundings, even with my eyes open in the blackness, though I still can't see anything, I please to pretend to envision it. The desk is right there and the piano over here. Then my eyes slowly close and I trick my mind. I go ahead and notice around the room, and I'm still able to see my room completely intact through closed eyes. And I wave my hand in front of my eyes, and I'm able to see it clearly. However, as I open my eyes, I am immediately able to tell the difference between the two perspectives. I also love placing a machine in the bedroom that supposedly filters out dust. However, I don't exactly use it for this particular purpose. I love the humming sound that it makes, and when I enter deeper into states of relaxation, drift back and forth from asleep to awake, I notice that the humming of the machine completely disappears, and as the sound appears back to my mind, it tells me that I was experiencing earlier sleeping. I always thought that in order to first fall asleep in bed, one has to float around images, sounds, scenery, etc. in the mind. Then, when it is noticed that the will takes control over the images, and extraordinary events begin to unfold in the mind, this is when it is known to be sure that one is ready to fall asleep. Sometimes when this happens at first, it only happens for about 5 or 10 seconds. Then one immediately wakes up and recognizes that from that point on, one will enter into sleep for the most of the rest of the night. For this stage is now started up and will continue until one falls asleep for more or less the rest of the night. When asleep and in states of dream sequences, it must be noted that the imagination may be having an out-of-body experience, and that the imagination is exited from this universe into a deeper, more obscure realm or plane. One finds that there is no sense of gravity or weight to the observed object in this experience, that the imagination can travel quickly from place to place in the blink of an eye. I believe that a rational will controls the dream only to the individuals that have gained the ability to do this. The form that has not the ability to do this merely dreams involuntarily against the will, and that the will constantly finds itself floating about in the realms with a sudden unpredictable change, sometimes a pleasurable one, sometimes painful. Occasionally I would notice that I wake up immediately because my body has jumped itself in the bed while asleep. I always wonder what exactly this is, and I realize that this happens after my imagination has jumped or fallen inside and out of the body experience and landed. This leads me to consider the fact that the physical body reacts accordingly with the imaginative experience itself, the experience which appears outside of the concrete physical plane. Therefore, the physical body tenses up or relaxes in accordance with the level of stress within the imaginative experience. The body will experience pleasure or pain in accordance with the experience, i.e., nocturnal emission almost always occur after having intercourse with a spiritual being on another plane. The physical form sweats and becomes cold with experiences and events in the imagination. The travels in the planes are sometimes very emotional. The human wakes up sometimes in a state of severe depression, or might actually have ended up crying in his sleep. Sometimes he meets a beautiful nymph in a far-off land and wakes up only to never see her again. Only rarely does the astral traveler find himself to meet up with this woman, but it may have taken a long and tiring amount of searching around in the mind to find this beauty once again. The human sometimes finds himself in a state of nightmare in which he is persecuted and eventually mutilated with weaponry by the person that the traveler undergoes trouble within his physical concrete experience. Usually the traveler wakes up in a state of shock and turmoil. He enters the concrete world again in the middle of the night. I always wonder what happens if the umbilical cord in the imagination is suddenly severed, and if the traveler will return home alive. Perhaps this theory connects with sudden infant death syndrome, the mystery of particular infants that suddenly die in their sleep. Perhaps there is a stronger correlation between the sleeping infants and a severing of the cord in the imagination, therefore explaining the mysterious death. February 21, 2006. 12. On the advocacy of death worship and death metal praise. I notice now, since I look back at my life thus far, that I always have had a preoccupation with death. I have for a very long time been fascinated and inspired by death, the unknown, mysterious figure, sometimes in a black cloak with a Xxiii. I recall having encounters with him in my travels during out-of-body experiences. I recall having this weird reality-dawning feeling upon hearing about gruesome deaths and watching effective horror cinema, like during the end of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead at Katara. I believe that Cannibal Holocaust may forever be the most shocking horror film ever made. I like to invite people in to sit them down and watch these movies with them and observe their shock and traumatic visages. I think that showing them pictures of real mangled corpses or decomposing expressions with maggots crawling in the innards is a strong feeling that one can experience, and when hearing them ask, "By God, is this real?" or by even nauseating them and having them later experience nightmares over it. I think that people believe too much in their own supposed immortality, and that murders, crushings, severings at Qatar never happened to them, yet that only happened to their neighbor next door. They become shocked when a strong wind blows a sharp debris and severs their leg. They feel shock at first and cannot imagine that this has finally happened to them. It is every man's doom in one way or another. Death cannot be escaped from anyone. Death cannot be escaped from anyone. I live such a realistic and solemn life, even taking pleasure in worshipping death and horror, otherwise especially hugely traumatic states of shock in individuals. I could never see how a person would be so happy with his existence. I love to see him experience a death, or to have a whole arm severed, to see him go through a grief process, and realize just how frail and soft the human body is. I love when I turn on death metal in a large public room with a band like Early Suffocation, Cannibal Corpse, Mortician, Deicide, and so forth, watch a person's reaction when he hears this music for the first time. It is so funny, for his musical scope is ordinarily limited that probably nearly most Americans do not know that low-pitched, growling, or 300 beat per minute blast beats exist in music. He ordinarily supposes that rap or hip-hop is the most extreme and hard form of music, but as soon as he hears the first 2 seconds of legitimate death metal, or of any other kind of extreme metal for that matter, that of which is worthy and truly intuitively faithful to reality, his belief is immediately put in the grinder. But his defense mechanism is one such that he instantly denies this form of music, that it is truly so extreme. He would probably say, "Turn that noise off." When he listens to the rap or hip-hop nonsense, he looks for almost totally different principles and ideas in masculinity and strength in music, which these principles are wholly irrational and sentimental. The sentimentality arises from very real and unresolved corruption in the understanding, beyond grasp of sufficient knowledge, and thus beyond liberty to terminate the very characteristic perception that is observed by an outsider into his distinct identity and delusional thought pattern. Extreme metal demonstrates a creativity totally removed from metaphysical suffering and irrational sentimentality. It is ultimately nature dialectic that imitates perhaps the bird, or it is societal dialectic that imitates perhaps God, reason, and truth, beyond the desire to affirm corrupt ignorance and dark fantasy. Therefore, it seems proven that as extreme metal is part of the truest and realest forms of music eternally invented, that if this were so, then how is a style of music that does not even propitiate a simple, crunchy wickedness to be considered a worthy contender to eternal reality? With this, a slow, suffering thump below the fire of any Teutonic fury or truth invocation, a random dejected narration with a poor bungling of words alone. It shows that perhaps even most forms of classical romantic music show a stronger intensity, immateriality, and truth than most of the forms of this hip-hop and rap nonsense. Get it thus behind the February 22, 2006. 13. A rant on what I'm currently pondering. One thing that I like to see in a person's fear is that of him shying away from me when he sees me walking past him down the street. I don't want to be normal and fit in with the failures. I will be as frightening as possible to them. For instance, I shall take the most pleasure in dressing up with corpse paint, and paint pentagrams and inverted crosses onto my forehead, just to scare away the suffering Christian. I want him to see me as his God. I'm a madman and a lunatic that people should think has dominated endless amounts of competitors. and eaten them as food. I think Gilles de Rais would be the good example of this. Somewhere along the line, I've heard that Countess Elizabeth Bathory had killed her children and dipped her bread in bowls of blood to suck out the actual blood. I've always had a fascination with Oystein Euronymous Arset and Per Yngve Olin, or Dead, or Meili, in Nordic mythology, name, title, apparition, way, and looked up to them as stronger reiteration. Oystein Euronymous Arset, who is Abiel in Old Testament, Holy Bible, religion, name, title, apparition, way, I find a great amount of similarities between Meili and I, and that, like him, I do not believe in this world that I live in. I wish ever from another time, a greater, ancient, more mysterious time, wherein everyone were mystics, wizards, sorcerers, traveling through clear portals in the subconscious, and hearing revelations from domineering gods and ideas, where everyone reside in castles, and the times are medieval, or most preferably pagan, that we dress in shining armor, and the women dress in medieval blouses, wherein I know a woman there, and she and I are eternal partners, in a land that we both look up to, and which I serve and she cares for. That I had known a woman from the day I was born, and was friends with her for the remainder of our lives, and I mean good friends, from the early days of our lives, and we grow older together, that it would be ever romantic when we finally begin to explore our hidden secrets for the first time, and play with each other all alone in a forest somewhere. I hate a person that does not enjoy nature in the both intellectual and physical sense. I think that there are so many different objects, species, types at Xxiii to choose from and learn from in the unknown lands across the home community and the exotic earth. I think that it is ridiculous people do not see any difference or inequality among independent, separate ideas, for it is so obvious that inequality is there in every single thing that one is capable to see and to learn about. With 6 or 7 billion people on the earth, it would be a fantasy if the persons were of all similar value. Just how the individuals differ from themselves in relation to intelligence quotient, physical stamina, beauty, etc., it would make certain sense that most of these world ideas would differ from others. Of course, the modern humanist always prefers to point out only superficial differences, which outside the box account for the minuscule summary of what is being accused of. I think that Count Arthur de Gobineau is another one of my current idols. I adore the fact that he is an aristocrat, that his beliefs and his actual physical rank in society seem to correlate with this, just how an inferior and non-mannered man, and the fact of him being a peasant, correlate. But of course, as always, the humanist will point out only that not all peasants are inferior, that not all aristocrats are mannered. But I always respond to the humanist that he forever supports the inferior idea and overlooks the evident victory of the superior. February 28, 2006. 14. Thoughts on the ascetic insane man. After conscious a while during a good time in my life, with such a cheerful and principled background, the streets, clean as they ever were, humans ever so friendly, wealthy, educated, mannered, I noticed that when I was cut off from this environment and placed in the opposite setting, a situation wherein things were not so heavenly, people less friendly, they do not like great cheer, or the intelligent ones that have high aspirations about life and great dreams for the future. A setting wherein people spit on the ground, they blast uncultivated and dense thumps from the cars with no consideration or connection to the rest of society that identify with their otherwise relaxed utopia homestead. This becomes a shock at first. The magnanimous reasoner quickly grows greater and more envious for his return to civil and societal normalcy. He is either more aggressive or more passive, reactive and intemperate. He may at first feel denial, more so, fall further into a process of grief. He may withdraw from the societal matter and become a hermit, an ascetic, which in no way is an undesired state, for to continue his state of longing. This is where he pursues the greater things in life that shun from the many. For him, he hopes to achieve a perpetual perfection of knowledge, inspiration, energy in the arts, science, perspectives at guitar, music, philosophy, mysticism, alchemy, linguistics, asceticism, religion, which is better when pursuant of the pagan religions of cheer and clean ideas, like Asatru or Greek. He loves observing any others around him, for he does so every once in a while to the degree that he laughs to his understanding when he hears the others speak, for he loves dismissing the commoner in his mind. the unprincipled, profane, vulgar, degenerate. He is so foolish, dark, curse words. Woman, so ordinarily vain, unconcerned, valued irrationality, uninitiated, ignorant, unprincipled, naive, uncontrolled, simple, clever, extremely vehement, emotional, witty at guitar, the justified, identified European. So, when upon his use or attempt to intellectual reason, humble, soft, depressed, irrational, subservient, charitable, defeatist, overcome, despising of his state, inferior, Christian. The ascetic man takes pleasure in the pursuit of even more extreme measures to exert an extremely fearsome impression upon others. They shake and tremble with fear when looked at his form, this ascetic man, with his robes or extravagant costume, the tie, the monocle, a long messy white mane, the frown and raised eyebrow, the man of complete tradition. He appears to others a madman, a great scientist, a creature of a dark nocturnal medieval castle in Transylvania, that lives alone in all isolation, playing his grim, wicked, tragic pipe organ during a stormy, thunderous night. The rain pours down on the conifers, the forest around him in the isolated mountains. He comes out of his castle, and behold, both confirmed peasant and aristocrat shudder at the horror of him, and what they, the commoners, think and imagine his mind and person as, a feeling no one miraculously gets any more. It is rare. March 14, 2806. 15. The isolated ascetical mystic. Metaphysical mysticism, societal mysticism, in reaction due to the perception of hopelessness, denial, lost ambition, fallen inspiration or motivation for the end complete. He becomes depressing, in some cases rabid with intense hatred and urges to slaughter, but mostly kept hidden and subtle. But it is here, in this moment, that comes the perception of the hidden perspective, the old outlook, but that for the populace it is unable to recognize. Therefore, the man becomes sentimental, taken in numerous ways. He avoids debate, but when given the chance, he dictates to his listeners with pleasure. Mysticism, a connection to realms unseen. Idealism in its purest sense. What is idealism? He longs for particular theoretical ideas to the furthest direction. This gives him pleasure. He knows what is right and wrong. He no longer tends to any second iteration or doubt in his speech or discourse. He possesses a sufficient evidence. His entity is fully evolved and actualized. He knows the populace does not see things clearly. He is able to speak them with support from memories that are always old and especially forgotten to others, but they now exist for once in reality. His imagination is different from opposite persons. His most primitive thought patterns are not even similar to those of different representations. His intellect is highly evolved, beyond doubt. His will, constructed with genetics that are inherited from his almighty father, bear a construction of impulses, primitive perceptions, organic sensations, that all accord to the life back at his pure home, which in some cases may ingrain in the man's mind from corrupt intention. Actors with their plays, musicians with their operatic settings, artists with their paintings, plain folk stories with their rhymes and songs, and so forth. My favorite case is when this principled man begins to withdraw from societal setting and determines to live an ascetic, isolated life somewhere away in forests or mountains. It would be interesting to meet such a man who has not spoken to a soul for decades, a being that is fully devoted to himself, without manipulation from outer, more corrupt, postmodern community. He is his own society, his own leader, his own workforce, his own farmer, his own legislator. For the fact being that he is beyond the ordinary limit of superb intelligence, he does not take these tasks and duties in the wrong direction. After a while, he loses his humor, for this is against nature. He is pursuant of the highest state of imagination. He hears thunder roaring in the distance, the calling of Thor. He does not bathe and is not afraid to eat insects. He is not afraid to eat insects, although he is not apparently needed to. He's relaxed and thinks clearly. He's deep in his thoughts. His sense of concentration is unparalleled at its peak. Others cannot break him into reality. He is now able to see with long distances in view. His logic is practical, creative, analytical, theoretical, never sentimental. He knows not to be sentimental, for passion and unresolved liberty will tilt the balance in favor of a new regression to corruption that would lead to the metaphysicist to his disappearance in the long run. in great million-part societies, this would take thousands of years, but always finally occurs. With, with reference to the Roman Empire, the more terminally successful ancient Egypt, the society of Atlantis, ancient India, modern America, for the most recent example, evidently determined to perish, in this particular case, with a swiftness unparalleled to otherwise far more secured comparative examples throughout history. The isolated ascetic man achieves perfection, and sheer, with everlasting clarity of ideas, with reasonable, correct thinking. March 15, 2806. Thoughts on archetypes and human type hidden motives. 16. Thoughts on archetypes and hidden. 16. Thoughts on archetypes and human type hidden motives. Recently, I've been pursuing the more archaic, unheard of aspects of life. Definitely some things that the modern day fool would deem taboo for its kind of daily activity. Now that I have become more aware, I'm able to see the world entirely differently than for what an average, everyday, uneducated fool would. I notice certain characters in men that are similar so that I may group them together and have a source of information ready about them when needed. I've come to notice that one can find all sorts of unworthy or unfit people to be truly representative of their kind. In this, I don't mean endurance, stature, strength, and I don't mean beauty, but I mean the character and intellect of these folk that are together disagreeable to a man that knows the greater aspects of life and thought, not the ideas of libertarians, humanists, modern music and art, new customs and unproven belief systems, commercial production, etc. What man of classical antiquity would possibly carouse with this tiresome naivety? But, of course, certain of the more human ideas are fully aware that they are just as rational and soul-preserving as I am, only that they are advocates of my diametrical opposition, something that should make a conscious member of the Western Empire shudder, not in fear, but rather in despise and hatred. One does not see this. Rather, one sees the humanist welcome the ill-schemed idea into the solar state, and hopefully lends the idea a helping hand for whatever matter, for he pities the idea, but not in an ill-conceived way. He makes it desirable, so that the humanist may spread a banner of vain and foolish kindness and spread his devious propaganda to the remaining solar state aspects, to chip in on the charitable, submissive, suicidal attitudes, and ultimately erase the archetype. Of course, the tools of his propaganda do not tolerate him. Hidden from the foreground, they desire to annihilate the Western human, so that they may make the now propitiated American constituent non-Western again, probably because the West was cruel to them in old world times. To them, the West is devilish. Sometimes, ever more frequently in the societal terms, they make it public with their intentions. The funny part is the question of archetype in totality. The Jew Superman does not find representations in atomic matter, rather in the character of the person to that of a defined collective concept, which is understood as the archetype. Therefore, feminists are surprised when the Superman deems an aspect of spiritual form inferior. In essence, it turns out that the ultimate numerous parts of his corrupt will are evidently opposed and demonstrable in the conceived parts to the effect of time and place that these parts cause from, even though pure corruption exists. The archetype is left alone of its character and intellectual activity and abilities. March 18, 2806. 17. Angst and despair in the form of thought patterns concerning the modern world. I see democracy in action, and I see results. The results are not satisfactory. The humanist thinks his insight will lead the path for the future. What is the future? What is future, anyhow? Hasn't this future already been peaked and surmounted since antiquated times? It seems he just wants to break the barrier, which of course leads to his elimination in the long run. What I have today is a disgrace. I feel angered and saddened that my would-be great etc. grandchildren will perish their identity, for they will long since be eliminated from the earth at the rate his births are going, in diametrical proportion to the rate in which the utilities of humanist propaganda are propagating in a massive horde all into the heart of the Western Empire. Why couldn't time travel exist today? If it did, I would immediately digress to anywhere between 800 before Christus to more or less 1700 after Determinus, in a blink of an eye. Obviously, since the faint-hearted humanist would be asking, the destination would be anywhere in the Western Empire, Tula society, Grecia or Roma, Viking Scandinavia, medieval Britain, perhaps even the Second or Third Reich. It seems that this time span, 800 before Christus to 1700 after Determinus, consists of relatively the same perspective as regards general ethics, culture, art, and science, philosophical outlook, as I here at least uphold. The modern collapsed humanism is vague, unproven, and against natural societal tradition and evolution of civilization in the Western world. The humanist will say it is a good thing. Really, it is nothing but a resolute decline in everything once naturally taken up to its peak. I think it is just because my character cannot get over the prior mass destruction, for I was too conditioned to look at it as something bad at the time, rather than naturally see it as a relief and satisfaction from many despicable things that was difficult to overcome. March 28, 2006. 18. On history, kings, monarchs, and romantic music. I take it this new belief in absolute monarchs and the divine right of kings, though these monarchies appear to only established by preceding autocracy to accomplish whatever certain things that need be taken care of in order that the monarchy be secured of its existence. I've been getting into so many new things, all of them concerning the past, of course, since nothing justifiably modern interests me. I've been learning about the medieval nobility and classes back during the pre-Renaissance times, the coat of arms for every family that's noble, the knight with his suit of armor riding into the village with a horse after a return from victorious battle for his country and people, lords, vassals, and serfs, the kings of their countries representing the next closest step to the heavens, though of course this is something Christian. I wish it would have been more pagan. I think this Christianity of pre-20th century times is something I'd like to take more interest in. It seems nowadays to stand for only the lowest and corrupt virtues. I've read now that the French Revolution before the turn of the 19th century is practically the conception of the contemporary world in its known corrupt state, the death of the ancient regime. The Italian Renaissance interests me, for it is the time that writings were discovered concerning knowledge of classical antiquity from ancient Roman and Greek times. The authority of Aristotle wanes. The Renaissance was full of renewed dignity, aspiration and virtue, culture and dress, music, art, etc. I particularly enjoy reading about monarchies of the 17th and 18th century. However, here it is noted the 19th century, most notably of King Ludwig II of Bavaria. This German king was fascinated with Wagner's music, read poetry aloud with his companions, traveled on horseback, and later on in his life he summoned a stage designer to build his Neuschwanstein castle in the midst of the Bavarian mountains and forests. There he grew more fascinated with his imagination, envisioning a world where he was the sole absolute monarch. Unfortunately, the nobility declared him insane, and they wouldn't issue any more of his statements to the public. The angry aristocrats showed up at his castle where they wanted him dead, but of course it was in secret. Somehow he died while going on a walk around a lake, where he and his friend were both found drowned. It wasn't done by the nobles. I'm enjoying the great works of art, especially music, by the greats such as Franz Liszt, Robert Schumann, Frederick Chopin, Ludwig van Beethoven. I think the piano represents a cornerstone in musical expression, where it can be used as a condenser of orchestral sound into a single instrument, though I think the only problem with it is that it is hard to maintain a single sound in concerns of duration for prolonged periods of time, something that would be useful in the conveyance of only the most passionate and romantic themes and climaxes. Tremolos are good solutions. March 30, 2006. 19. A long for love and romance for my mistress somewhere out there. Lately, I've been fantasizing over my ideal woman, a companion I would like to find someday off in the future. I think the modern world conception of woman, that of the feminist attitude, is nothing but disgrace, and has its deeper roots hidden in female homosexuality. I wish to imagine my friend, whoever she is. In fact, I would love this letter to one day be read by my love, whom I would spend the rest of her time with in eternity. That she and I are quite similar in our bond for each other. She and I would take a carriage off to the remote woods, mountains, and fields with all of our belongings, and we would take our stay in a cottage somewhere isolated from all of society, just her, me, and nature for our inspiration. She would be dressed like a maiden, a beautiful lass that the gods had their hopes for, a pretty simple dress, a draping white blouse, a bow tied securely in her blonde hair. I'd be garbed in either a black tie suit or the costume of the garments, the suspenders, brown pants, white shirt. She and I would part ways for the morning and afternoon. I, the caretaker of the harvesting, the maintenance of the field, the master and butcher of the animals. She, the mender of the cottage, beautifying and purifying the house clean at Qatar. The cooking of the foods would be one of the most important parts of the job. Great lavish meals of meats, vegetables, breads, taking much time in preparation to later be gorged in satisfaction at the end of the day. She and I would go on walks down the paths of the woods, resting in leaves, nestling together in the warmth of our compassion. We would play outdoors with the leaves and branches in the summer, rest by the fireside in the cottage during winter snowstorms, reading poetry to one another side by side. I think I would take a piano with me and would compose romantic, splendid tunes for ourselves to bask in while our days passed by, though I would add in some Schumann and Chopin and such every now and then. Sadly, this kind of lifestyle is only too rare in this fallen empire. Therefore, what is the use in hoping to achieve a lifestyle like this, longing for a woman that is secure enough in her mentality to identify her role with the tradition that so many men of current aspiring antiquity wish for her to be? This letter goes out to the one of the past, the one of the fallen empire that is not a purveyor of her time, but rather outcast and dejected, hoping for hoping for a time that will all end and be gone for eternity. To see instead the return to nature, rural utopia community, senses of value and structure in family, communal spiritual life. Then will there be more men and women of romantic aspiration showing up in the land? That can we live at last in harmony with ourselves, not in harmony with opposites of foreign ideas and characters, but can we see ourselves working for the best and most noble ends? A land of triumph and victory, of love and romance. An embrace of empathy for the maiden somewhere out there in this frightening and decadent modern world. I hope to meet her one day in the future. April 1, 2006. 20. A new insight into Mother Nature. Just today, I finally decided to take advantage of the hiking trails that exist on the edge of campus at college. Such a delight, really, that of tuning out the mindless city inhabitants and traffic noise and feeling myself connected to the sights and sounds of well-tempered, beautiful nature. I traveled so deep into the trails that everywhere I looked, I could see nothing but the product of Mother Nature. No sidewalks, no streets, no buildings, no people. And once I became more attuned to this beautiful way of leisure, I found on top of a heavily treed hill a bench to sit on, and when I did sit on it, I finally got to relax my feelings. I heard the birds and blue jays in the trees nearby begin to chirp again, as I grew more comfortable with my being. And there it was that I began a serious study of nature life versus city life, and how it really seems so important that corporate construction stop at an instant. There it was that I could feel this connection to my father's offspring back in the antediluvian and antique times, strolling about with armor and sword through the thickness and sometimes sparseness of Mother Nature. No industrial construction of corrupt, misused wood, stone, or brick, especially not metal. That this person, so rare and eternal, has his legacy, that every once in a while a wanderer meets with another. They approach each other with "Hark, who goes there?" and such. They reveal their names and where they are from. I'm King Odin of the land of Odin at Qatar. They exchange with themselves their life stories, which is always interesting to hear about. They grow attached in comradeship, travel together now, claiming whatever territory they lay eyes upon as their own, and those that they deem undesirable and backward to their character and intellect, they battle with their swords to the bitter end. To the victors go the spoils. I wish now that my current home was located in an isolated sect off in the forest, where I lived in a land of nymphs and fairies, elves and wizards, and there, one day, in the utter depths of the most hidden woods, I would see the path laid before me in a clearing of the undergrowth, and there I would see the most beautiful birds and doves fly about, Squirrels and rabbits, deer are hopping about, making way for the human, and I know that beyond this clearing in the forest, where the path would lead to, would be that of a most beautiful maiden, her sitting on a trunk, playing a wooden flute, a most beautiful melody, really, and I would approach her and we become mates for our lives. We would travel about in the depths of the forest, claiming whatever land we would see as ours. I would name the land in honor of her, this maiden. When I found myself back traveling home in the city, I was impacted at sight with new conceptions of city dwellers, for I had been so used to this kind of idea of the great outdoors. Here in the city I realized that there exist many more people than the eyes can muster, that most of them have not so much value and worth as that of the few natives of the land out in the depths of the woods. These city folk have all the same lives, the same story to tell, and that they go about their day, busily working for their money, getting home and causing mischief, quarreling with their family, neighbors, their spouse, children, etc., spending their free time at the homes watching television, sometimes up to more than 4 hours a day. Enough with them, I now think, and I began to enjoy the thought of living this life in pure nature without any assistance of beings with a societal authority. For instance, I would not rely on food as a thing to be harvested and produced alone, without a visit to the markets. I would rely on the construction of my home with my bare hands. Of course, this is rather difficult to do, for I would need tools, and according to this philosophy, I would have to make the tools as well. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of absolute independence from the outside world, though I do think the maintenance of life in the woods requires certain things, which I do agree that I should be the caretaker of, such as seeds for plantation in the soil, the necessary tools to harvest and produce crops. I think these crops would consist of potatoes, beans, lettuce, etc. I would also need livestock for the necessity of butchering and cooking animals such as bovines for milk, butter and cheese, chicken and hen for eggs and meat, steer for beef. I would need to make my own candles for light at night. All this sacrifice is worth to make to ensure that I live a life clear of any nonsense from the modern world, that I live in harmony with Mother Nature, that I am assured of the fact that my existence was fulfilled to its greatest non-diluted effort, that I am a son of the past, present, and future, a man with his existence fermented in the soil, never to die out and be forgotten. Long live the land of nature. April 4, 2006. 21. Down with you, modern world. Today, as well as every new day that comes to pass, is nothing more than a pedestal to suicide, anger, bitterness, madness. I think the modern world is what creates madmen, as I certainly classify any legitimate intellectual. My community, just what is this defined as? I came to believe that if I were an offspring of my family, then I shared a spot in its life source of that sanctuary, while thieves and bandits were shunned and kept few in number. Now what I see is mass destruction of my character, coming from the thieves and bandits themselves. I feel unsafe to live in my home, the sanctuary of peace and communion that my fathers helped construct and preserve. It is because of this pressing issue that I now become more gloriously entwined in my fantasies, living in an imagined utopia in a distant universe that will never exist in this horrid, obsolete prison. I came to idealize over anything of my father, especially about anything having to do with the years before his birth. A life of kings, nobility, warriors, peasants, class systems, aristocracy, bourgeoisie, native costume, high art, swords, armor, plate mail, high caste linguistic, intellectual ingenious thought patterns, similar behaviors in speech. A small rural community bowing to nature's snowy forests and mountains, a breed creation of offspring belonging rightly and securely to their homestead, where thieves and bandits were either executed or driven out with simple success, torture chambers for criminals who commit theft, burglary, hatred for the state and its subjects, whether it be the children or the sacred rooms or the perspective of the familial lineage. I think I would like to see recurrent thieves put on the rack with red-hot pincers in complete view of the family. I also think soon I'll complete a rough draft of constitution or familial law for all friendly neighborhood families to conceive, Western, of course, stemming from America to Italy to pertain to more or less Russia. I believe one day I will withdraw from the corrupt, thief-infested community entirely, either probably committing total self-abnegation or setting off into the depths of the forest or mountains, somewhere away from all the foolish masses and herds of submissive, irrational death sentences, tricksters and criminals, queer impotents and hollow, sterile matriarchs. A life I would live in complete solitude, in harmony with nature, plowing and harvesting my own beans and potatoes, drinking from an as of yet unsoiled pond, living in a cabin I built with my bare hands, playing on an upright piano, my own Baroque or Romantic compositions, pieces by Bach or Liszt, Schumann or Wagner, reading books that are from the 17th century or even medieval, in complete solitude and peace with myself, my work, my once familiar homestead, a life that sounds at least most optimal. April 17, 2006. 22. Biomes, botany, gardening, solitude, forces of nature versus forces of man. I've been recently learning about nature's landscapes, climates, and biomes of what kind of fauna, especially flora, she contains in them. After careful selective judgment of which biome is aesthetically preferred over the other, I would have to say forests, especially coniferous mountainous forests, are ideal for me. A desert is preferred the least here, while rainforests and deciduous forests are somewhat ideal, though not wholly. Islands and grass plains are in between, while swamps are somewhat lower than them. I've been learning about the dispersal of plant seeds, a sort of scattering by wind down to the ground all over various distances. There they would lay dormant for some amount of time, depending on certain natural conditions, which then they will germinate and begin to grow. I learned that when the pollen or the male gametes of the plant or tree is mixed with the female chromosomes by different methods, usually by bees, that these chromosomes will bond to create a fruit that has seeds in it. I think the skin and the coating around the seeds of the fruit is what constitutes protection of the seeds until it is ready to disperse and mix with the soil to create a new plant, tree, shrub, vine, etc. I think the fruit of trees, bushes, or vines is a beautiful part of nature, and I always wanted to grow my own garden somewhere, full of apple trees, orange trees, blackberry shrubs, grape vines. Lately, I've been taking a predilection to going on long walks out on paths immersed by all sorts of trees, plants, grasses, birds, and hills. I'd be gone for the whole day, sitting on an isolated and lonely old bench in utter extraction from traffic noise, chattering people, doors shutting, industrial artifacts, just completely in tune with Mother Nature. Never a thing that distracts my attention from her. I think her forces can be very beautiful and lovely, but then can be harsh and brutal, annihilating, eliminating. And for that cause I reason humans should model their forces after her, and not to look at her in contempt. A government that rules by the herd mentality, or a father that submits precariously to the ego of the wife, or even the son, deciding for unclear reasons what to do, is in fact a blasphemy and defiance of the model set by Mother Nature, for nature rules with an iron, and in this case, nature rules with iron, in this case, deciding on what is right to do, but what is for the best of her intentions, not for the uninitiated. She could either affirm or deny what is current, but it does not matter, for she destroys it anyhow if she pleases. Most of the time, the flora and fauna will rebuild. Sometimes it becomes extinct. I believe man cannot counter the forces of nature, but at times, when she is dormant, he can take action. If the course of nature in man's time is to wither the man away and make way for a newer, more inferior specimen, then I'm sure man can help himself enough from stopping it. But if it so happens that the environment he lives in at the time, where there is not a number of his species at the time to procreate, then nature does her cruel job in destroying his existence, he becomes extinct. But if this one man miraculously counters his destruction by subjugating and reorganizing his corrupt matter in time before he dies, then he conquers his security of existence and does not pass on to become extinct. Though is this still a part of Mother Nature's force, or is it man himself purely acting who has countered the unfolding events of nature and made them his own for whatever amount of time? April 21, 2006. 23. Hear ye, 'tis the decree from thou newest king. In amidst a rather pleasantly natural yet socially turbulent day, it has been issued thereof by the rule of I, King Odin, I, that on Frigatag, Juni 9, 2906, of the Common Era, there is thus issued a decree condoning the reinstallation of rank and hierarchy in the Western Empire, most notably the entitlement and appointment of the new aristocracy, reserved for the more noble, heroic, and virtuous characters, the entitlement and appointment of the new peasantry, reserved for the more depraved, manipulative, and liberal desires. It is now issued immediately the beginning of the process to appoint those of Deutschland, Russ, Norge, American offspring, etc., to the homesteads of Deutschland, Russ, Norge, and America, respectively, as has already been begun in some areas and has been accomplished successfully elsewhere. This royal decree sentences the beginning of the destruction of all industrial corruption, whatever this appears to represent. The description is decided elsewhere for more practical legislation. Here it is seen that all urban and even rural areas, if it so happens to be, that here will commence the destruction of any artistic design, artifice, or architecture pertaining to the postmodern digression, wherein all peasants, aristocrats, etc. will gather together to enjoy the ceremonious fires, only to later rebuild anew castles of art, grand architecture, Greek and Roman, Gothic, medieval, Baroque, classical, romantic, etc., old-fashioned timber frame cottages, etc., if it be a subject's choice to later reside. This decree also issues forthwith the abolishment of any representative music in this empire that is not purely art music. Here we see the assemblage of representative state orchestras, chamber groups, choirs, opera productions, soloists, etc., 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 dedicated to the rights of preservation of the superb traditional spirit of arts, antiquity, medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, classical, romantic, etc. It is said simply that the West will finally once again rebuild the artistic and spiritual habits of forefathers' empire. This decree issues also forthwith the abolishment of whatever garbs that are not traditional dress and costume, according to whatever particular solar state. For all soon-to-be aristocrats, counts, barons, etc., feel free to consult the nearest imperial servant concerning where to pick up the court costume, article, accessories, etc. For all soon-to-be peasants, please consult the nearest state merchant or craftsman on picking up the national folk costume. Knights, warriors, legionaries, ye shall be sent sufficient information on your journey to the national capital, where ye shall be given access to the recently restored training grounds, where you, the warriors and defenders of tradition and family, will be taught whatever necessary virtues of honor, bravery, loyalty, strength, etc. You will be trained to skillfully sword fights, to arch bow and arrow, and to operate musketry, and sue hand-to-hand combat techniques. You'll be awarded a tributary suit of armor, a commendable sword and shield, in accordance with your skill as a knight, warrior, legionary. This decree also issues forthwith the abolishment of all political partisan parties that do not belong to the familiar solar state tradition. If it happens that my time soon comes and I pass on, it shall be by the prior training, wisdom, and experience of my older son, the prince, conceived from my sunlight and composed of fine character qualities, that he shall take up reign as King Odin too. If it so happens that at any time I, or a future king, am incapacitated for some duration or amount of time, unable to rule, then it shall be by the supreme judgment of the royal Odin family, the royal Aesir family, to choose an able and efficient member of the family to rule until the official ruler soon happens to regain his ability to reign. This decree also issues forthwith the abolishment of whatever religion that is alien to the empire's lands of solar estates. Here Xxiii is seen once again established as a religion of practice, devotion and theory for the Scandinavian region, and so on, where it is dutifully permitted of rational empirical philosophy of whatever type or science to be discerned and preserved as a substitute for a minority of fine, gifted, and rare persons, preferably within certain aristocratic foundations. Men, this decree is for the formal re-establishment of the Western Empire, all of its fine qualities, prior submerged and once corrupted, seemingly eternally, to the scorn and frustration of our better judgments concerning family, community, art, manner, value, rank, order, religion, science, education, etc. This is the deserved reaction to the postmodern disease and depravity that had plagued this land once into turmoil. Its process conceived probably since the conception of that Christus. Feel free to witness life once again as a son and daughter of the Western Empire. June 9, 2006. '24. Silence, men, thy king speaketh. Yea, we shall call to order. Hear ye, peasants, aristocrats, men of various classes and regions, thy king thus speaketh. Men of the lands and climates of the Western Fatherland, I present this speech to thou today in a rather sombre tone, for as I looketh there out in our semblance, with all of our comrades prepared for battle, and spirit to uphold, to think at this moment today could not and would not have been possible without the conviction and submission of our fellow men to our divine Father, that we now have our hearts and willpower, could not be a sight and vision any greater, in past, present, or future. I, thy king, savior of the traditional spirit of the West, issue this statement, expressing victory over libertarians and humanist drones, that in certain places, such as Bavaria of Deutschland, there is already completed a thorough re-establishment of Western spirit and aspiration, which in this case consists of the overcoming of all that was postmodern contemporary, and the preservation of any remaining works of art from the traditional preservation of the region, as well as the reconstruction to overcome the postmodern contemporary blasphemy, with several well-planned timber-frame cottage villages, with a few castles already akin in grandeur to that of Neuschwanstein. Most of Britain is assorted into separate classes in accordance with the priority to the old customs of Britain, as well as many state aspects of the West elsewhere. Though submission and acceptance of this movement has not been total, I have decided to assign the ranks of the peasantry to consist of, though of familial lineage, that of persons which cannot see the importance and value with what we have been trying to accomplish. Alas, fellow philosophers, warriors, artists, laboring citizens, I look forward to hearing some great new operas, or to see some grand medieval castles ascend into construction within the near future. The summertime philosophy of this reborn ancient regime I expect to be wonderful to hear about, as well as the new holy, kind, spiritual perspective that emanates from what is left off from the remnants of the prior legitimate past, before corruption once overcame too heavily the will and spirit of the Western character and intellect. My men, onward solar subjects with thine duties, this new Western Empire cannot be rebuilt and reinstated overnight. Hear ye, thy sacred trumpet call the new order. Salute thy king. Shall we commence our work, men? Yea, saith we. The men bow to him, his greatness. June 26, 2006. 25. I belong to my father's homestead. I've become convinced recently that I have a body that is stuck in the 21st century, but my spirit's thoughts, will, mind, etc. have been implanted into it, directly derived from a long ago deceased king, prince, aristocrat, from somewhere during antiquity, during the medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, classical, romantic age of Europa. I am familiar with this, especially occurring when the years of this body was around 13 or 14, during the first couple of years of the 21st century. Perhaps during these times this foreign spirit I had in me at the time became violently agitated by the onset and invasion of me, the more noble, honorable, virtuous, powerful, wise spirit, with a mindset completely alien to the contemporary idiocy that is ever so described the postmodern Western spirit. Perhaps this constant tapping into the past before I emerged, i.e. the persistent piano playing. I remember when this body was 7 or 8 years old, I would be driving somewhere with my Kopecky Walker family. I would angrily switch the radio to classical music. Nowadays, I feel almost completely alien to my home. Even experience has taught me that walking around in a black or white tie suit only leads to bizarre looks and possibly angry relations. I don't even know where I can get a royal court costume or powdered wig anymore. What frustrates me the most is that great men, mentalities, passions, masterpieces, communities, etc. do not exist anymore. I've been studying for quite some time now the differences between a serious ascetic mentality, spirit, and that of a carefree, vainly, and stupidly cheerful, politically suicidal mentality, spirit. So-called philosophers claim that, especially referring to clean societies, that peasants, low-class workers, etc. are in an environment that does not condition them to be cultured and prominent-minded. I would truly like to see a civilization where everyone truly is equal. Referring equal to what, anyhow? The low class? High class? Cultureless? Cultured? Intelligent? Criminally disposed? Characteristically cold and rational? Typically warm and sentimental? The optimal setting in this instance would be equal to kings and noblemen, a vision that is very ludicrous. This intelligence is a myth theory. I agree that intelligence quotients based on academic questions, quick solving math problems, puzzles, etc., the objective unnecessary kind, is not the pure description of intelligence. I think I see a man's intelligence related more entirely to different fields and to the seriousness, conviction, and time of which he applies himself to them, i.e., according to one field of intelligence. I do not consider a man intelligent if he happens to be of noble parentage and goes around town in a large mob, laughing, mocking, and belittling anyone that has a sense of grammatical, cultural, and dialectical worth, taking advantage of these industrial advances, television, stereo, etc., and using them as entertainments with a sense of distraction and oblivion so completely. It fixes his mind into that of a future and final man, winter and disease, further away from the mentality of that of a past and potential man, spring, summer, and almost derived, pure and clean. I really don't care much to further this argument. I hear already the usual counter-arguments, wherein I argue back. I feel as though what it boils down to in the long run is a question of good or evil, whatever this may be, democracy versus whatever other form of government in which the herd, low, uncultivated, and so forth, are not in charge for once. God forbid this, says the libertarians. The state, defined and legalized by the ruler, established, executed, and practiced by the will of the subjects, with the numerous principles of nature observed and taken root. Once fallen and principles uprooted by the character and spirit of Marx et cetera, I observe and conclude it becomes into the horizon of philosophical insights currently this equal value of mediocrity, and easily observed, though difficult to see through ranklessness, especially in accordance with official title, privilege, right, and responsibility, etc. Worse, the thought that it goes so far as to assume intellectual, disciplinary, and cultural harmony. Though we, the men of genuine tradition, always know that intrinsically the natural ranks exist and cannot be erased, as though by forcefully elevating the status of a Philistine barbarian to that of a king or nobleman. Now I even sense that it is evil to think nobly, with great aspiration and philological reverence, or to even go out of the way to create a masterpiece of art. The fools will ask, do you think you're better than everyone else? Why do you try to be better? Are you evil? Aren't we all the same? Ha! And I always notice the amazement of random persons when they hear me play the piano initially. During the second or third time, I recall them asking me, Odin, how do you do this? Or, I could never play what you play. If I tried practicing this for 1,000 years, etc. Imagine if all I would perform were pop tunes on the piano. They would probably enjoy it more, since it appeals more to the degeneracy of the spirits I reflect within. But they won't be shocked or impressed, feeling the unique respect which is ever more accountable in prominence in the opposite setting. This is just music. I feel a painter or writer, an actor or statesman, has just the same capability to exert greatness and vigor as does a gifted artistic musician. Painters and writers have it easier than the latter two, actors and statesmen. For to bring back great things in the music world is to hear musical thoughts from times no one is familiar with. But music of the past is more familiar with the general mindsets of the West, for good reason, though however inferior currently this empire is that I live within. But to bring back great things in the acting world, it must be noted that the superiority of linguistics through time, whether it be Greek, Latin, Grammatic, Romantic, what not, it seems it would take a truly great man to compose a dialogue today akin to the greatness of Homer, Shakespeare, Goethe, Montaigne. This is only the linguistic element. Imagine the garb, the architectural surroundings, the humans which disappear ever more quickly, the nature which likewise disappears so quickly. Even worse off than this is the statesman of today. Imagine a truly great king or emperor existing anywhere in the West in this era. One wretched obstacle to this is that practically all aspects of the Western Empire have converted to liberal democracies, following that Christus's practices, and not even the value of the highest authority in this land, whether it be Germany, Britain, etc., is even a thousandth the value of that of, say, King Louis XIV, or basically any able, legitimate king or emperor during the monarchical and aristocratic times before the French and industrial revolutions. I think now that great things, culture-wise, art, religion, science, governments, is not achieved in an equilateral, partisan, distracted, oblivious society. I even conclude that once all struggle is eliminated, to found, preserve, and progress a state to a higher level, rather than what fools refer to as liberating, not even the thought of creating something great will again occur. Even the highest man becomes exhausted with the concept of magnanimity, and the decline further ensues. This is also when grand things become evil, racialist, whatever, what I've been describing in the above paragraphs. I think the solution is clear. If might, virtue, and grandiosity are to die out, and man is to descend into stateless barbarian warfare, then a rank and hierarchy system akin to legitimate, healthy, sufficiently lasting empires, clergy, probably a pagan clergy this time, nobility, warriors, artisans, merchants, peasants, etc., is at least a first step to raise the Western Empire away from the future of utmost stupidity and barbarism. To sum up what I'm trying to say, or what I have been trying to say for this time now, I think all these ideas of mine are intended as a pure and sufficiently correct solution to achieve a complete shift in time from the 21st century madness to that of, say, any time before the 1700s in Western Europa. Perhaps this is the most subconscious goal of any master moralist of philosophy. June 30, 2006. 26. Origins. During the first dawn of mankind, the Earth's lands were positioned completely different than from what they are as of today. During this first dawn of human origins, the lands of the day were relatively connected together, what is called Pangaea. I always hear fools trying to say that the Western man comes from Africa, or the more deceitful ones claim that we all come from the same place, therefore we are all related. As these tricksters continue to try to destroy the taboo of interfamilial mixing. According to the theory of evolution, our ancestors, primates, evolved into what we are today, but it is just too strange to conclude with this. I now realize that evolution does not occur whatsoever if a male mates with a female, if both the two happen to be of identical species, breed, type, etc., and the environmental conditions do not degenerate into corruption and mistake. The DNA and genetics of offspring will turn out to be totally similar to that of the parents, in accordance with the hereditary formation of characteristics. The offspring mirrors the parents completely. I have to insert the question of just how long the planet Earth has been in existence, for according to the theory that if man has evolved from primates, and for the progress of time in order for such a radical evolution to take place, one may have to wonder that question. Lately I've been hearing tales that Earth is not even 1 million years old. It's more in the range of the 10,000s. Not to mention, according to evolution, that primates have descended from an even earlier, more primitive species. From that species, an entirely more primitive species, until the point of time when nothing but single-celled parasites ruled the Earth. Before this, merely inorganic matter and an astronomical dialectic. It is correct to think that if, over the time, any variation of humanity within a particular family, the offspring with its intellectual capacity, reason, liberty to corrupt, etc., never mixes its bloodline with the other variations, then biological evolution will not occur at all. But is it considered evolution if the variation of the human family that is the furthest disconnected from primal origins, the Nordic, mates with the variation of the human family with that of a Congoid, with characteristics most similar to that of the human species of primal origins? And for the truly foolish readers who don't understand this, once this mating occurs, the offspring, even if conceived appearing as Nordic, will forever have in its genes the ingredient capable of producing a Congoid, when it later matures and mates as well. Just imagine the corruption this trend will cause if the purified Nordic of this generation mated with nothing but the Congoid until the generation was over and the offspring matured and became the new generation. For one thing, hardly any Nordic variation would be in existence if the trend continues. Note the inevitable and evident shift in demographics as a result of the births and ratio of Nordics to mulattoes. The generation after this will produce twice as many mulattoes and twice as few Nordics. Even these Nordics will have in their genes that of the ancestral Congoid type. Within several generations, the damage eventually becomes total, and the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, strong and fine, long-skulled, etc. Nordic will vanish, never to return. The result hardly considered evolution. With this course in practice, without legislation to deny it, which this at present is easily evident to demonstrate its occurrence, all inevitably ends up mixing mulattoes with themselves, the human population of Earth consisting of none but a stuck mongrelization. Evolution for the eye that begs variety and affluence? No. Devolution for such? Precisely. But to get back on track with what I've been originally trying to say, evolution seems to apply to each human family in its freedom and isolation from other variations. It can even be left to assume that the human family had arrived to Earth already pre-existing, biogenetically constructed and conceived by other greater gods. Something so mysterious that hardly any clear and credible literature has been written about it. I think it is possible to credibly believe that men were, or at least originally, completely separate biogenetically from any other variation. It could possibly have been parts of the late and new pure human race to have originated and lived on planet Earth. Apparently, it is said from a few others, when the human family arrived via unidentified flying objects from outer space. At this time, by the way, which proves their youthfulness as a race. Their land masses had already shifted to the present-day positions. They probably dropped their creations off on the most central part of the globe, i.e. the African regions, which the Earth was at the time inhabited by strange giants, possibly dinosaurs, and at the time there existed a previously present land section which later drowned mysteriously, probably by supernatural forces, and on this land the fairest variation of however many numbers originated, eventually constructed and gave birth to the most advanced civilization, far surpassing any other civilization known to exist for the next several centuries, the civilization of Atlantis. It must be noted that the other gods at the time also walked the lands of the earth. Atlantis, which is Placentia, California, United States of America, particularly so in the philosophical religion, in the philosophy religion name title appellation way, particularly so, first and foremost, particularly so, it must be noted that the other gods at the time also walked the lands of the earth, but apparently they grew jealous of their creations. There must have been a war. The aliens quickly disappeared back to their home star, probably Sirius, only later throughout the millenniums to come back and acquire individuals to check up on their creations and their creations associations, to take the organs of livestock, etc. The ancient Greeks, especially the most prominent philosophers of ancient Greek, i.e. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all had given accounts of information on Atlantean civilization, mostly from the prior generations, which had preserved their sources from their even earlier generations, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, most all of the more meticulously detailed information on Atlantis was destroyed in a fire, the fire that burned down the library of Alexandria that stored all sorts of information, likely particularly on this subject matter. Apparently, the discovery of some of the remaining writings by late medieval Western scholars went on to spark the Renaissance of the 1500s. Anyhow, it seems likely to prove that the theory of evolution, or even of the Old Testament's theory of propositions concerning the dawn of man, are only parts of something greater to believe. End point. We could potentially never had descended from the same specimen. The white, yellow, black variations may have had their own unique and independent origins. That is, here perhaps 3 or so variations of a human idea, constructed and set into motion upon this earth several thousand years ago by the will of other greater gods. Possible, though not wholly believable, but a mere aspect of original speculation that is otherwise either impossible or very difficult to discern. July 2, 2006. 28. Excerpts from my unfinished novel, worked on and left aside in the 14th year. Page 1. It's like a bunch of jotted down notation deriving from my mind whenever I break contact from reality and have these superior ideas that constitute questionable, imperatively intriguing subjects that mediocre average people normally don't think about. I haven't exactly commenced on this yet, because one only hasn't been formally acquainted with a familiar affection toward me, but one also might have an inquire as toward where I have decisively brought up this optimistic, more of a strategic pursuit of focusing on such an insane topic. The question should be, how the hell did you think of this? Page 49. The proposed task is to increase intelligence through electroencephalogic surgery. The requirements are absolute necessities in order to produce a keen sense of completion. Every recently conceived human will undergo this surgery, which should take large amounts of hours. For the newborns, with page 50, full obligation for the surgery. It will soon become as required as polio shots or circumcision, minus religious beliefs. What we want out of this are geniuses. A total world, specifically every human with an intelligence quotient over 200. If this works, who knows just what might happen. If this fails, the government has every right to jealously execute us. Keywords, if this fails. We, of course, won't be around to see this, sadly, because it takes a more or less minimum of 50 years to see about half the world become as smart as us at this facility. Required procedures consist in mutating the brain through fluid chemicals and customized pills. Page 51. Also, the basics of the future surgeries are based on simple multiplication and major increases on certain stimuli. Electrochemical impulses are the nutshell of intellectual aspiration. If these impulses are increased by the production of nerve cells and neurons, the specimen's will to learn will become ceaseless at an unbelieving rate. The only way to the construction of neurons is to reproduce them by a man-made chemical or some other material nature. A suggestive lobotomy should be another source to effective brilliance. Without a lobotomy, the specimen is concentrated much of the time over its sentiments. With a lobotomy, the specimen has no worries about its sentiments, emotions, and will focus on nothing else but intelligence. The electrochemical impulses might even increase as the specimen learns that its life is here to learn, with no other worries. Another requirement is the duplication of association fibers, which will help tremendously for the specimen in a way that it will not forget anything. The enlargement of the basal ganglia is for habitual memory of constant learning. Located above page 52, the diencephalons. This enlargement will distort the brain's size and outfit the skull. The solution to this is a general reconstruction of the skull with a plastic custom plate to fit the needed measurement. Another important requirement is a true prominent increase in electrochemical activity. This is not surgical, but stimulation pills will be doled out at 1 to 4 times a day, depending on the potency. The activity increase will order acutely with an obtuse thirst for knowledge, while the common sense thought patterns will statistically be at a dominant level when situated with the stimulating drug. Another stimulating drug is an antidepressant, even though the specimen will not be depressed. The antidepressant, such as Zoloft, Effex, or Geodon, etc., will manufacture serotonin on the operated brain, which will cause mostly insomnia and hyperactivity. The specimen will not be frustrated with the aggravating sleep deprivation because it will have the already operated lobotomy, which will take out all of its emotions. Page 53. The theory that the brain produces electricity, also known as brain waves, constitutes a major influence on the neurons and neuroglias that function as electric wires. This is not exactly true when dependent on the force of the transmittable theory. The brain wave, which is a generation of electricity, has three types: alpha, beta, and delta. Alpha has two parts: the alpha rhythm and alpha blocking, which were introduced by German neurologist Hans Berger. The alpha blocking, which occurs often through anxiety, will be neutralized in result of the lobotomy. The alpha rhythm should mostly disappear through the antidepressants, which will cause a non-depressed specimen a slight sleeping disorder. The alpha rhythm is when the person closes its eyes and becomes moderately relaxed. There will be stages when the specimen becomes sleep deprived. However, the electrochemical activity caused by barbiturates will, page 54, sedate the specimen, creating beta. Beta is the norm required by the entity. The specific brain waves beta are high in frequency in cycles per second, CPS, which originate from a quick emotion. The delta brain wave is the extremely relaxed state of an entity. Perhaps during sleep, it produces at least half a CPS of a brain wave, or at most 5 CPS. Now, if these brain waves could alter to alpha rhythm, could the specimen be nurtured in a state of higher conscious intellect? I mean, if at 7, if at 7 CPS, wouldn't the specimen become so relaxed that it could concentrate and seek onward to knowledge with an easiness of reason? I think it is possible, but how could this happen? Delta occurs during sleep, and alpha rhythm is when the eyes are shut firmly. To acquire the aspiration of open-eyed alpha rhythm is impossible without the source of a mind-inducing, differing medical drug. Now, the theory of altering electrical brain functions is radically controversial. The discerning of this distress, page 55, preludes an argumentatively mistaken idea judgments. An anecdote. The brains are electrical. Why do neurons transmit brain waves in a form that recede in force, that is oppositional to electrical velocity? Incredulously, philosophically hypothetical. The current state of recognition is debatable, systematically complex, the intangible corruption, led by optimists of electrical brain research, of numerical seceding, is only prejudice hypocrisy. Prejudicial in a form of simple partisan-favored judgment conclusion in unresolved scientific ideas. It is deduction of intellect. In a manner of spiritual paranoia, it is bestowed upon into its derivation of questionable matter. The experimentation of common brain waves is not entirely demonstrable in what I'm saying. Consideration from potent genius to mental retardation is what did not happen spontaneously. The common factor which accredited the theory of practical brain waves was unanimously unchallenged. If the ideal subject was randomly averaged into its current disputable conclusion, it would be of an entity with a 120 intelligence quotient. This is relevant to serving gesticulation. That similarly, the science is about the probability of, page 56, of successful surgical implants of an encephalogical computer chip placed in the cerebral cortex. If stated just now, it is successful, the logic capabilities and brain capacity will increase proportional to the frequency of electric wave production transmitted from the chip, but it is controversial in regard to the actual presence of a mechanistic jolting electricity in the brain. I personally believe that the brain generates electricity itself, and it is a great source of conductivity. But some people, whom as well know the subject resourcefully, sometimes disagree with the concept of electricity. The mutation of intelligence, lastly, requires an obligation of increased sensory impulses, but doing so will cause an undesirable headache. Painkillers shall be given out. Now, presently, the growing output of scientific method, suitably excessive surgery, ultimately amounts in the subject to an equilibrium of rationality and consequently monotony. The novel Charlie, or subtitle Flowers for Algernon, was a novel fully based on the surgical increase of intelligence. Charles Gordon's intelligence quotient indicates a process of mental retardation from around 60 to 80 intelligence quotient to the surpassing, page 57, of 230. It is written in his fictitious journal, and the structural sentences commence from foolish and simply plotted fragments to established, complex, intricate declarations with an ingenious message behind the words. With reiterated components fully fresh and ready, we hold the potential blueprints to luxury, to discernment of success, and to victory from the common knowledge. the intelligence, superseded without distortion or corrupt utilization to newborn extremes. But the science is so theoretical. In fact, the social risk of 100% success is at snap points. The availability of a victory is weak, with disdain toward this intelligence increase postulates. All we can possibly do is speculate and run the test, the surgical test across the world, bestowed for our brilliance forsaken, with the systematization in check, ultimately in the Lord's own hands. Page 98. I was a leopard in the plains of the wilderness, forced with a cold yet everlasting accusation of a realistic condition surrounded with the label, living in reality. It was a long-term understanding that is currently conceived with a potent aspiration in a corrupt life, of a vivid desirous effect, with too much ambition to let myself, the beast, recognize my reality. Presently, my friendly leopards had willingly left me, for I was, without reason, eating my food without their share. My play of fighting turned into roaring blasphemy, and a cowardly rage of teeth showing, tail-curling, paw-scratching tournaments of red-blooded warfare. But it was the wrath of my own self, eating me and swallowing me, without my approval, but however with my, page 99, approving activity. As my own vision of the leopard, I decided selfishly to live my life with the others, but only to my positive advantage. I was an intelligent leopard. I willingly was secretive and manipulative. I took advantage of my food, especially of the others. I had fought with will, volition, a reputation that I'll muster down to a few simple words with a lexicon meaning in it. Infamous and notorious. All animals have three types of will towards sustenance. The first, which is the most primitive, is, wherever food is, I eat it. The second is, you give me food, then you go away. The third, let me think about it. That is the executive deliberating brain, which the human is characteristically born with. Now I, as a leopard around others, was given this final type of brain, while all of the other leopards would be at the bargaining level. This is how I became a manipulator in my leopard form, but my inexperience superseded my intellect, meaning that I was not the master of manipulation. For once the abortion of my technique, but it humanely haunted me, which was contrary to the leopard pack, as it had left me. Now it was everyone else's turn to take advantage of me, page 100, because my term was used up, and in this condition I was formally constituted as lost to the wilderness, all alone, because of my infamous and notorious reputation finally being analyzed and dismissed for what it is. The pack now knows that I was the manipulator. This is reality. How cold and dark reality is, as though the sounds past the nocturnal trees are truly haunting me. Page 104. And as I lay there, I remember my life in my, page 105, level of incoherence. It was like watching a sentimentally dramatic film. My mentality was fixed in an altered state of human recognition. The setting was black, as if I were lying down and staring at a starless sky. But I had envisioned yellow flecks, and the flecks were sparsely bestowed with a spontaneous feeling of dead matter. My life was running with me, as if I were holding the story in one document. But I wasn't holding it was running with me, like my only friend left in this world. This world was my mentally envisioned citadel. Crystal lights were beautifully glistening in my past, and I ran up to them onto my mental journey. God, my life was so beautiful. I fell to the ground and shattered without any spirit left in me. My mental state was melting away from all life, creating the black void with the yellow flecks scattered around it. The crystal lights were melting with it, and I envisioned a grasping motion to desperately reach and overcome the lights, but I couldn't accomplish anything. As I lay there on the ground, convulsing, I finally accepted the vision, as the gradual lights tore away from my destroyed life and the black void began. Page 106, circling about my presently isolated and dejected life. It was the interior of my shattered life, and it belittled me, just as I was belittled from the past. I was clustered mortally as the molten crystal lights diminished, and the one and only shattered object was now a peril within this black universe. It was so enigmatic and novel, as I was perpetuated and convoluted, continuing to sob hysterically. Just then it was too much for me. Events deconstructed my entire self and was left eternally with a blessing. My mind thermally radiated, and the intensity forgoing from my body was as though 1,000 ice picks were slowly engaging through my interior. In my mind I held my breath, and I just now realized that the pain was over. I had reached a state of bliss, yet I failed to understand the stages of this process, which meant that I could have been otherwise dead by suicide. But was I actually dead? How did I die? How did I in fact die? There were cases in medical history where a patient had died mysteriously of unknown causes, having an autopsy completed, yet not successful, leaving the body to be cremated or buried without a finished report. However, I didn't know whether I was dead or not. But if I wasn't or was, I still more or less understood what happened. Page 107. What happened to me was an experience with God, yet I solemnly resent Him. He has done this to me. He has made me forego the most abominable expedition of the worst kind of suffering that I had ever conceived of. It was so brutal and truly distressing that I was, during the middle of the experience, on my mental knees, begging for His sincere forgiveness and imploring for His merciful ways for the self-torture. What hit me the most was that He is frequently unresponsive, which is why I don't believe that God ultimately empathizes. Through time and space, it becomes a complicated scheme with the most robotic functions and inhumane practices of rational methods, ultimately destroying the humans and animals. The grand scheme was an unendurable experience of unforgivable reconciliation. What I just experienced was an exact proof of the unforgiving ways. It was impossible to reconcile, compromise, and to negotiate to God through this realistic and brutal evidence of reality. My entity was aroused to nirvana. Am I now so lonely in this world? There is not any more a person in this world that understands me or even perceives me. I'm so pitiful and sorrowed, like a pure fool. I had failed to live earth, and I had failed to acquire liberation. Mind of a child. Page 221. But I was cold, almost sweating and dehydrated. Everything on my body, inside and out, was burning uncontrollably, as though all organs had burst from combustion, and as if my skin had shrunken out of proportion with the rest of my body, leaving me astride and bestowed, literally scattered into an eternal stretch. I needed to shake my head and hands. Pretty soon, I needed to shake my legs to wake myself up, to keep myself alive. Little did I know it, this soon became involuntary, for once I was exhausted from it and had tried to quit. I had failed. To my formidable perdition, I was convulsing and could not help myself to stop it. I had felt autistic. I understood the whole world around me, but could not help to chip in. I couldn't speak. I tried calling, but it failed. I tried to fall to someone, but it failed. The world was whirling around me far too fast for me to keep stable. I felt entering a vortex, a waterfall, with me falling down within it. I was gripping the arm of the seat. People in the theater intently had watched me seizure and convulse rapidly. A lonely universe, a man shaking, dancing on the floor contemptuously, falling away from the cinema into the sky, never to see again. The planet ever so lustful, the moon ever so benign, the star, the rebirth, the harmonious calm, the sun, the competitor, the page 222, devilish. I want her, and a part of my mind opened up, a closed and sealed part that is never meant to be opened. It was the section unable to open until I knew that I was going to die. God, help me. I feel myself burning up. The memories, oh God, they're still here, but on fire, patiently melting away as I grasp to save them. To reach, I obtained, but I dissolve into ashes. My memories dissolve into ashes. The unable to open compartment is spitting out my life, my air, leaving me to suffocate and to perish. I felt acidic and final. This is the climax. I truly am dying, and I never understood why. God, I died for what reason? Why did I have to die to live? I don't remember my life anymore. I have no memory. It has burned up. I do not remember my name or who named me. How does this world work? Why do I understand the concept of words? How do I know English? Where am I? Am I dead? Is this heaven? I realized that I can't be dead, for I am perplexed, thus suffering. Perplexity is a form of passion, and passion is a form of subjectivity. If death cannot experience any more any pure passion, then I am not dead, and that is when I was curious. God, are you here? Is the spirit world still alive, or am I talking to corrupt matter? Or am I talking to some truly transcendental truth, an idea that I have never heard of? Page 223. This is real. I'm talking to the truth. The knowledge no spiritual breather has truly met before. But will this truth disown me for reasons that I have not ever communed with it, or even been shown wisdom of it before? If the worst jolt of pain ever came searing through my being, or whatever the hell I was, I was envisioning dots through the blackness of my void. I recovered and was startled to come to sense that I was jolted again, and I felt a pain centered on a living being. I was living in a human body. My being was but only too similar to a human. It had to be. I understood myself being reunited with his body, that I didn't even know how it felt. To a human, my thoughts are invisible. But then I just realized that I understood the concept of multiple beings. My whole life was coming back again. I was born to a woman. My woman, her name, Dort, wed to Odin. I understood the concept of unity, of united entities. Yes, it is possible. If everyone is united in some way, what does that make me? Am I old enough to have a beloved? Yes, I'm old enough. Did I have a beloved? The next jolt was the worst of all three. Everything in the so-thought body was rushed with warm, pulsating liquid. I felt my eyes pumping with pressure, my newly induced mind soaring to fresh, brilliant ideas. Everything was renewing. Page 224. Everything was up abroad. Mechanizing, working. The book itself was worked on from October 5, 2001 to the month of February 2002. 18 extraneous thoughts. 1. Richard Wagner in music. Much might and remembered nihilism sound as beginning source from the moment until the end. His music speaks on life, to be or not to be. However, the question, is life natural or civil? Is it one or the other? Is it either all or none? All else, no. This is it. Chopin's, Schumann's, no. Also, civil Europa prior to Romanticism, applicable, not even. Civil Europa, post-Wagner, the music, he is there, his sound remains. Musical nihilism becomes, it exhausted never is. October 2006. 2. Vorspiel of Lohengrin. If there is a sound that has many variations, though that lasts not even over a dozen minutes, that truly could not be a more ultimate source for inspiration of the forced music, then this description would apply solely to the prelude to Act 1 of the opera Lohengrin by Richard Wagner. If man listens to the sound of the prelude at least more than once, it does not get even a chill, lest he become tense or emotional. Then he must be captured and shot dead in a blink of an eye, for he is not sensible to the total spiritual idea, thus ultimately undesirable to upright evolution. This more or less 10-minute opening is not meant to be taken lightly, and will intentionally be written as a heavy madness that is found in no other composition, especially outside Wagner's influence. I would assume by now that it would be a crime to have this prelude treated casually in a listening environment, whether it be a performance in Bayreuth or played via record in a disinterested public setting, the latter being the most heinous. No, this is forced music that stands beyond any comparison. This Vorspiel is single-handedly awarded the anthem to music of the forest. September 2006. 3. Posture madness. Keep head up high, physically. You're not afraid of your height, are you? And don't shake head when walking. Shaking head in thoughts, or when walking or sitting, will receive criticism. Keep arms, chest, and stomach in shape and strong. Value upper body strength the most. Keep head confidently straight, not balanced to a side. Do not think of yourself as a pretty. Don't be obvious when brushing your hair in public. Don't play with yourself at any time in public. Focus on something elsewhere, away from your body. Facial expression should show you are in reality. You must be extroverted, humorous even, showing the thoughts. Look at that strange person over there. He's strange, isn't he? Legs, when standing, should be apart from another to quite a length, though don't worry as much about the legs as you should your arms and head. I don't care how my legs appear to you. Remember to think that you're old and in the way, slow and confident. I've seen worse, I've been through worse. Keep slow and never rushed. When bending down to pick something up, keep back and neck straight. and kneel down onto one knee. Keep buttocks hidden. Focus elsewhere on your outer world and something strange or quirky within it. Remember to keep the arm strength even in both arms. When going to sit down, use strength from the upper body and knees, never the buttocks, keeping head up straight, the arms in shape is strong. Do not shake anywhere in the body. Keep steady. When standing, don't appear to fall or to trip. Keep focused elsewhere. If feeling tension, leave the setting to regain your confidence and strength. Meditate well before re-entering the environment. Eric. October 23, 2006. 4. Conversations 1. Today was crazy at the college with the music students. I showed up to do some practicing right at the hour before the honors recital started. The music students were in good spirits. All of them were friendlier than ever to me. I was so cheerful when I left. I was hoping they would call me in for a surprise improvisation performance that would have been so awesome. I have a unique playing style. I've extracted sublime sound from Wagner and developed it as far as I possibly can, though my current recordings are not portraying me out of my best. The new piano is wretched, yet there are old recordings of me that capture how I sound live. I have a different feel when I play live. It's much more extreme, more mighty. I've been wanting to write down some music and orchestrate it. I think that would sound so bombastic. Imagine Ride of the Valkyries times 100. That's the effort I would put into whatever composition for orchestra. The only recording on the MySpace that I feel comfortable with that portrays me how I wish would be the fucking Force music piece. There was 30 minutes of mostly improvised tremolos and fortissimos. The plan was 2 songs for a demo. The second one was going to be 50 minutes in length. I was so meditated in that state with myself at the time, though my life hit a total dilemma in the midst of it all, and I was without a piano and the ability to record for months. And by that time I got the new piano, which pales in quality. I lost the state of meditation that I had been at the time of the forever incomplete Music of the Forest demo. I want to put the piece back up online now, haha. The song was recorded using Crystal Audio Engine with the atmosphere sound effect on. Any louder the volume would go, then the sound would max out in static. It was unfortunate. By turning the volume up it can be heard, though. It was a pain remixing that piece, a 30-minute shot each time. Leather pants were popular in metal. Celtic Frost and bands from the 80s. I think they were awesome. Leather gloves, fringes on the jackets, goggles, helmets. Not really though, haha. But leather. The army surplus store is stocked with leather gloves. I bought a pair for $20 American. Fingerless ones, however, I'm not sure, but the ones I purchased were cheap and readily available. Black leather. I have a pair myself. I wear them walking around town with my boots and bullet link, haha. I was almost arrested during a promo shoot outdoors one night because of the way I looked, haha. Too metal to be legal. The cops said, "We've got a guy sporting a bullet link here." It was so funny. I'm sure metal could be too awesome for legalities. We should start a campaign and incarcerate and persecute the imposters. We'd be the first Metal Reich. Instead of the SS, we'd have the MW, Metal Warriors. Yes, and the ruler would be referred to as Führer, because he will have within him the power and fury of metal. I'm pretty sure Manowar would be the first rulers of that regime. Undoubtedly. Who comes next? Not sure. Well, the regime would be so mighty that when one rules the empire, he becomes immortal and indissoluble. That just goes without saying. It would be a billion-year Reich. The empire falls only when the sun implodes. Then the empire just moves to the heavens, where it is taken by the Valkyries to Valhalla to bask in the Golden Hall's eternal beauty, and everyone on earth becomes immortal. From that moment on, the gods walk the earth as men. The great metal Ragnarok arrives. Then the universe is destroyed because of the sheer force of the mighty metal gods clashing among each other. Yes, it is later retold at humanity's rebirth, the tale known forever as the Warriors of the World Saga. So mighty. Kirkut, December 2006. 5. Conversations 2. So Manowar is amazing. They're gods of steel. I'm inspired on how to be more metal than ever. Buy leather pants, get buff, haha. Eat lots of red meat, drink mead. metal is not for the merciful man. Eat raw eggs, some good cheese, roast beef, more raw the better. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups for exercise. Run and bike for endurance and development. Balance the diet and consume as much nutrients as possible. And balance this out by exercise and wear leather and spikes. Haha, you'll be He-Man. I should drive to Elfin Forest sometime. Parts of Valley Center are a lot like Elfin Forest. During nighttime it is so black metal. No cars, no electricity, no people. It's all woods and forests. The test is to stop the car and walk out. It takes the might of the gods. Man must be strong in every respect, or else he goes home without the treasure, or the girl, even. I was once afraid of certain things. The key technique to overcome fear is to practice meditation. This will bring courage and might. Staying meditated helps so much. Martial arts or combat training will help too. To be fearless requires confidence. This comes from taking action, not sitting and thinking. Experience really boosts the morale. Everyday life doesn't always call for these things. Life in the suburbs is easy. Haha. Polar survival. Being stranded near a chain of icebergs. Parts of life call for serious courage and stamina, both mental and physical. Without physical strength, the mentality doubts. Without mental strength, your body exhausts. They are also important separately. With a better recording condition, a new song would sound so great. It would be like the Forest Music days, but even more since time has gone by, and I've been just fucking want to add in some vocals. The owners of the current place would kick me out if they heard me growling. Haha. They are quite old and believe Led Zeppelin to be the devil's music. When I move out from Christian territory, then I'll make my move to record some vocals. I don't need a studio. I have recording equipment. Damn, I'll just need to wait, cause another thing. The house is always quiet. The owners are hermits and never leave. I'll have to pack up the equipment and truck on down to Tours. He has a family that wouldn't mind, thank the gods. Curricula, November, December 2006. 6. Conversations 3. Ha! The owners of my house must be deaf. They are watching television so loud right now. They're both 70-something years old. I swear I can blast a Suffocation album right now, and they won't hear it. The house is normally as silent as a morgue. So I'm psyched about the weekend. I'm going to Palmer Mountain to check out the weather and camp conditions. There's going to be a snowstorm over the weekend, which is wicked. Snow can be so much fun, especially if going for a vacation. But if going for an adventure, the snow should be approached differently. The freezing cold can be dangerous, and safety must be taken if venturing through a snow-covered forest, like Tor and I are going to be doing. I'll need more than a leather jacket. Yes, gloves, many pairs of socks. Haha, we were thinking about purchasing some parkas. We'd be true Canadians for the trip. But yes, we were thinking about renting some horses too and riding through the woods with them. With our swords, chainmail, and everything. Haha. But I'm a bit worried about the reservations. How the site says one must reserve several months ahead of time. That was for the developed campgrounds, though. The primitive sites probably won't matter. I think there's some fees and permits needed to park the car. Other than that, no reservation should need to be made. I hope. I'm calling up California State Parks tomorrow and going to get the info. I've been wanting to do something like this for so long. And I must get a job now so I do not become a street drifter. My money supply is dwindling. If I spend the last of mine, it's the streets for me. Unless I sign up for food stamps or disability, I might make a disability. I do suffer from a bit of schizophrenia. I refer to myself as a madman genius, though madness is the top of the line disorder, at least the least desirable disorder to have, the most painful. Writing and speech are fragmented. Thoughts are consistent for every waking moment. Can't sit in a room with other people. The madman eventually sees every man, woman, and child staring at him, reasoning with him. He knows no other way to distract attention. Eventually the whole room truly does begin to observe him and reason with him in a less understood way. The madness comes from outdoing the world, being extreme to no end. Then years go by, and all extreme things lose their value, and the world becomes meaningless. What causes the madman to will for extremity? Maybe because he's convinced he might be dull or stupid or even homosexual in the hard sense of the word, called names as child, and and reciprocates his inner self by substituting the core being with a logical defensive shell. At least that is my case. Haha. Music was Cannibal Corpse, politics was National Socialism, religion is Satanism, and so on. All extreme, heartless, and defensive. Logical and abstract, escaping and twisting out of the true reality, probably a reality of my character that is either or both stupid and that becomes harder and harder toward the most strange and curious production of homosexuality that I ever knew of. There's a lot of boredom in the world. What's left to enjoy are the normal and smaller things in life, which were not enjoyable from the start. The house sounds like a waterfall now, because of the owners with their television sets. Watching a tropical movie or something. It's rather intense, rather really loud with rushing water, such a peculiar sound. Here, November, December 2006. 7. Conversations. 4. The harmonic minor scale is simple if one knows the natural minor scale. Just raise the 7th degree up a half step, and then the scale will be harmonic. If the harmonic scale is in the key of C, then play G, A flat, B, and C sound. Then playing G, A flat, B, and C sound really distinct. It is not intended to sound strange in Middle Eastern music, not even Baroque or European music before its. Yes, the Romantics applied the harmonic scale, especially Liszt with his Hungarian Rhapsodies. The Romantics did this as they pleased the crowd. Usually the harmonic scale is applied, say, if descending from E flat to D to C, and to complete the phrase, playing the tone of B natural to C instead of B flat to C. This is considered a common practice period code, that is, common practice period stemming from the 1600s to 1900s. This example is given that the scale is minor, by the way. In the natural C minor scale, the B natural is considered a chromatic tone. The scale can be changed, though in Western classical music it's rare to see augmented seconds, such as going from A flat to B natural and vice versa. But yes, a harmonic minor is a wicked scale. I'm a product of my old environments, which is not rational or fair. To compete with the masters and to fight back successfully, I had to work arduously to become a master. Kierkegaard, November, December 2006. 8. Conversations. 5. One should try out a Wagner opera sometime. He's the ultimate epic romantic composer, really. Operas spanning 5 hours, medieval fantasy, a 15-hour Nordic saga. The music is pure love and death, beginning to end. Pure dramatic states, the heavy metal of the 1800s. Yes, fugues in the Baroque. Excellent music, the most ornate art, the grand style. The Baroque music is more truly technical than Liszt or Paganini, in a different sense, of course, but definitely an era of mastery. Bach being the chief musical madman of his time, he and Handel, during the early mid-1700s at least, were the representations of their era. Kierkegaard, November, December 2006. 9. Conversations. 6. I'm waking up at 500 before noon tomorrow. I'm getting up early because of the drive to Tours. Driving during the early morning is the most serene time in the city. Few cars, few people out. Great sunrise. The city is quiet. It is wonderful. I always love driving around early in the morning, midnight too. Once I went on a car adventure, randomly driving down a street as far as I wished to go. It was around 3 in the morning. It was so wonderful and epic. I ended up in a desolate wasteland. Yes, for me today it was intense. I was driving to Kinko's and the traffic was an infestation. For the holidays, I'm assuming, but suffocating concerning the car amounts, the people everywhere. Seems there's little room to breathe. I have some pages that were needing printed out. Unfortunately, I have not a printer. Nearly everywhere I know to print is closed due to the holidays, i.e. college. Buying a printer by itself can be very expensive. I'm having to budget more cautiously now. The pages are on a compact disc. Haha. When I wrote the files to the disc, I dubbed it the most important the most important compact disc in the world, to me at least, because of the dependency on this disc to not corrupt and lose all its files, which housed a considerable collection of very personal and irreplaceable writings. There are nearly 500 to 600 pages of writing stemming from when I was around the age of 15 until now, today. There are so many writings on the compact disc. So if the compact disc were lost or corrupted, and my computer crashes and or gets a virus, haha, my life work would be gone for good. Never to be printed out to see the light of day. Actually, around 300 pages are printed out, but if they are lost or stolen, you should print them out and put them in a folder labeled top secret and bury it. Or just inscribe them in stone. So I moved to a hidden remote forest and set myself to writing philosophical thoughts about the world for the rest of my life. Yes, and then you grow together with the woodland creatures and attach a script of your teachings to a rare bird and have it fly to civilization. Maybe someone will find it. And then man finds the writings declaring them a wonder of the world, so the people of the city go in a state of awe for all eternity. And they eventually develop a religion out of it. And all misunderstanding and industry is abolished. And everyone lives in woodland cottages and villages. And I am spotted every once in a while up in the mountains. The city man declares it a sighting beyond mystery. I am rough and grimy and carry stone tablets and crude weapons. My beard blows in the winds, and I am thought a caveman, a strange and supernatural mystery. And society eventually deems you to be too mighty to exist, and sets a bounty for the man to capture you. But whenever someone encounters your presence, the sheer mightiness is too much for mortal man to handle. Then I use my sorcery power among the people and transform their existence to a state of immortality, only because the mystery caveman creature is mighty enough to pity mankind, and you eventually construct the mightiest cave fortress by bare hands ever to be constructed on the face of the planet, and have apprentices learning the ways of the mysterious sorcerer powers. That would be rather awesome. Epic. So tomorrow, Tor is going to bring some swords, particularly his claymore, which he is going to let you, my brother Mimir, have for the day. The sword is 4 to 5 feet in length, a real mighty two-hand sword. You'll have fun. We'll teach you all the basic and easiest techniques. You will really wish to begin to fight. It is truly mighty. Handling a sword requires courage too. We are going to be there at Lake Hodges until more or less 1200 noon. This amount with the sword will give us plenty of time to warm up and grow comfortable with your handling one. No people are around this forest either. Tor and I alone went to Lake Wolford one time and had fought with our swords, a full-on duel in front of all the people there watching us. Also at Lake Wolford, 4 thugs came walking across our path one time, just Tor and I alone. We were not afraid, ashamed, or embarrassed at all. There is still a picture that remains on the MySpace. August 25, 2012 notes, this profile is since deceased, however. The caption reads, secluded forest at Lake Hodges. It should give you an idea of how serene this place is. It will be our place where we hike to, eventually arrive at, settle down for the time, and hang around, drool, and talk and such. So we met up at 700 before noon at Tor's place. We will most likely... So we meet up at 700 before noon at Tor's place. We will most likely take his van and drive on over to Lake Hodges, find a parking place, get out with our swords, gear, and such, and begin the hike to the forest. Bring a water bottle or 2. Granola bars will be good. The wheat thins I'm not so sure of. If there's little sugar and plenty of carbohydrates, the wheat thins will be good to bring. Around noon time it will be the hottest. Afterward, it gets cooler as the earth rotates and the sun heads west. We will be hiking in the early morning. There could be mist, could be not, depends on the atmosphere, the amount of nimbus in the clouds, the chance of precipitation and such. Around the lake, there's a good chance of mist. Around this time of the season, too, early in the morning, there will be a good chance of mist. Bringing a camera will be awesome. I absolutely love photography. Most of the trips Tor and I go on, I usually head to a convenience store and purchase a camera before leaving, some 20 to 30 American dollars each time to get the photos developed. So this is great. You are going to bring a camera. Well, I'm going to try and fall asleep. I don't know if I will, though. Sleeping during the day and such. I'm practically nocturnal now. Well, good night, and let us begin the journey tomorrow. Hail. December 28th, 2006. 10. Conversations 7. I printed out so many papers, just got done with that, bought a printer prior to this, which gave me hell setting up, especially the ink cartridges. Haha, I trapped myself. The whole room was covered in pages and pages of text on the floor and such. It was madness. Fortunately, they are all organized for the moment. I have to get them separated into different folders. This will be hell. Yes, I have around 50 or 60 separate articles needing organizing, then along with the rest of the billion of writings already printed out. The book is getting so truly epic. 700 pages, I think it is now. And shouldn't forget the 7 demo recordings. Those are going to be packaged along with the book. If this ever gets printed and published. Besides this, I'm a little mad recently, suffering a little more from madness. Haven't had medication for a while due to an insurance screw-up. It's been hell trying to stay sane. I feel I'm becoming bedridden, as though I'm going to out the way Nietzsche did. It can be scary without medication, especially one who suffers from madness, one who loses track of time, loses sense with reality, speaks peculiar jargon, becomes difficult performing simple tasks. This is worse in my case at present. I'm alone, no woman I know, no woman I love and feel love in return. This is a great cure for madness, to feel a connection with the mother figure, bringing the madman back to the days when he needed love from the mother the most, yet never received it. The great cure for madness is to know one is loved sincerely, especially by a woman. The harsh reality it is for me, because I know 1 or 2 women sincerely, and the friendship and trust between them and I is building at a very slow pace. I read from a letter from a particular woman. She's wanting to set up a time to meet and watch a good Miyazaki movie with me. This date was the night prior to the Palomar Mountain trip, when I thought the trip wasn't going to be postponed. But her brothers are having friends over at the house, and she's wanting to meet up with me at Tor's house, who's into National Socialism. She usually seems to take a long time to respond. Maybe she will soon. I hope that she cheers me up too. Really, I need to have a girl kiss me. I have lived my life entirely so far without any love from a girl. I was busy hating woman because of old misogynistic beliefs and all the strange hardline masculinity, which I came to learn as a defense for wanting suicide as a youth, due to such an uncompromising parenting environment. Being desperate is a key to failure. In fact, the object of mastery is to keep patient, remaining with the patience of the stone, as is characteristically my case. That is my test. Living my whole life without being understandably loved is not a good thing. The more memories of love a man has, the less prone he is to derailing from reality by abstraction and hard logic. So I see an acceptance now from me to the rest of man who would date a woman frequently. Seeing this loving experience as a positive thing really does help, not being practically obligated to the world as I am. This I have learned to be a great mistake. I need and wish to get a job, to continue going to college, to continue college especially. This is such a great source of socializing. Here's where people meet each other and earn a chance to talk, instead of wasting the time of life away, absent of opportunity to meet with someone. This I'm referring to my case, where I'm devoid of a job and school enrollment. I have a little chance of getting to know someone new, especially one who may keep me happy. But what can I say? Really for now, I hope to the all-powerful gods about this one particular girl to open up to me, and we may become friend and friend, man and woman. She seems to think of me more than I consider too. She has said to me how she does not enjoy the continuous sending of letters on the internet, how she would prefer to talking more in person. I said to her my phone number, though she hasn't called just yet. I find it realistic she will call me too. She and I have known each other for a while and have much in common and fond memories back when we were both in college and when I personally was ever the more active, aspiring, and fiery in temperament. All now there is to do is wait. She is a traditional woman. She is probably wanting me to call her first. Woman in herself seems to enjoy her rescue. She wants her knight to arrive to her. She wants her hero, one who will save her from the hardship of living all alone in the real world. You should ride up to her on a horse, wearing shining armor, and pick her up and carry her away off into the sunset. Haha, oh man, that would be the greatest moment of my life. Haha, she will be trapped in a circle of fire. She is being chased by an Abrahamic villain. I arrive with my sword, swipe off the head of the villain. She and I last forever in the land of sun and light. Take her to your farm on the bank of the Rhine. Haha, she cooks a great steak, a feast for godly men. The steak is actually the body of the Abrahamic villain. Ha, yes, the celebration will be so heroic and the Abrahamic villain so so despised that the question issue of cannibalism is knocked out of the spectrum. And all of Pagan man celebrate might. And they shall hold a 10-week festival in your honor. And 1,000 ships will be sent in honor of Fjord's beauty. And Odin himself shall open Valhalla that day, and all of his brethren to feast with him in all of his splendor. And the saga will be so mighty that a white burning light descends upon the 9 Nordic worlds, vaporizing all who are meek and perishable. That would be the mightiest thing ever. Here goes December 2006. 11. Conversations 8. I'll be bringing some new gear. We need to go to the army surplus store. The items there kill the amphets. They're all from the military, new and used in combat too. So much is there. Survival gear and stuff. Man, they have these rebel flags hanging everywhere, even military visors. Anyway, I've been such a hermit. I feel like I've become Dracula. When I leave the house, the neighbors see me descend from the castle. I've been getting out more the past few days. Agoraphobia is stifling. I need to warm up in the water now and not dive in too suddenly. September was a killer month for me, in a bad way. Too much to explain here, but I think you, my friend Tor, are aware. I'm getting there, back into the swing of things. Even after figuring out my identity and its relation to my childhood, I would still prefer living during the past, prior to the postmodern age of today. I want to die before I'm 60. I refuse to go to bed when I'm past that age and not be sure if that night is at 1 I die in my sleep. I want to die on the battlefield. That is really my plan, regardless if it be now, because later it is out of the question. Death on the battlefield is Valhalla. Be certain to kill some enemies. The SEALs who are joining new are estimated to kill over 120 people within the next 2 years when they are in active duty. The SEALs do not die. They have only had 2 die within the last 10 years. I will be killing many people, and I can get away with it. It is very strange. I've always wanted to know the feeling of killing, and afterward I'm fully trained. I'm allowed to. I'm allowed to kill someone. That is a crazy thought. I know it won't be an addiction after I retire, though. The humanitarian people I tell this to, in a more mellow way, say, "Oh, that will be such a toll on your health in future," and I'm thinking it will be great for me. Yes, they are surrendered already and are bait for the military. Remember, they make love, not war. It makes a person stronger, mind and body, to kill. It is our nature, especially mine, thus I need to succumb to it. Would you ever kill someone if you would get away with it like I will? After I retire, I will be a SWAT in my own hometown to eliminate the rampant criminals. I will not take pity and suppress myself in shooting others like the SWAT now does. If I have the opportunity to kill, I will. If there wasn't any remorse, any doubts, the postmodern age would not be the same as it really has turned out. The compassion for the weak is what has crippled this modern world. Doubts, civil liberty, Enlightenment Christianity in America's Constitution. Pity, the weak will inherit the earth. Feel love, hate is a bad thing, they say. That it is good to be weak, bad to be strong. Weak is suicide. Strong, however, we once were. Imagine life without television. Much better, solely and collectively. Even early television was a disease. It was either all or nothing. The manifest destiny concept should either have not been put into practice, or it should have been taken all the way to its entirety. The Northern Union was the enemy. They should never have won. They should have never won the Confederates. Thomas Jefferson and the proto-libertarian Americans were some of the supreme archetypes of the postmodern Western history and aspects of influence toward the ultimate collapse. I also enjoy Roman and Greek history. I cannot help my interest in that. Aristotle's thinking. Rome was a great world, the gladiator, the system of government. It was well predicated. Rome seemed to think it owned the world. Kirka, December 2006. 12. Conversations 9. I have a friend who's quite a fisherman at Catara. Dixon Lake and Wolford became interesting. I never really liked someone who was interested in, oh, let's head to the mall and hang around. I would find someone interesting when they're interested in things more personal and friendship-wise. For me, I like to do mostly everything. Music is a major part of my life, as well as philosophy. Also important for me would be the outdoors. I've listened to a lot of music in the past. I perform a variety of instruments, but piano being the prominent one. I'm yet to be a vocalist, if ever to be so. I do not really plan on lessons to be a vocalist, though since I approach the piano with a certain seriousness, I would plan on lessons for the piano in the future, if I decide on it eventually. I've been playing the piano since the age of 6, studying and performing classical music. Around the age of 9, I was performing Chopin and Rachmaninoff. I continue to this very day to practice and perform. Musically, at the same time, I listen to metal. People seem to think that this is a contradiction. The nihilism of the postmodern character ultimately leads the metaphysician to the old art forms, to old age in general. I would prefer living in a time without the mall concept, but I would prefer a time prior to mass industry and commercial intervention, prior to the Romantic or the Baroque era. Perhaps my philosophy is rather too excessive, too much to understand about the concept of beyond good and evil. Though this philosophy is probably connected to personal reflections with my life, it might have no relevance to the world in itself. I'm usually the pessimist. To be hopeful about life requires unnecessary practice and experience, which I presently do not desire or intend to obtain. Anyway, I'm conscious of myself, but especially try to be so, even if it do not seem like it. I'm under some real stress in my life right now. Looking toward the future, whatever this may be, I don't believe it to be the same pessimism as the one during the moment. The situation would be different. Every moment is different. The stress I'm under is from fearing that I may have failed life, that I may have never gave into anything of depth, that I kept a cold heart and systematic defensive shell from depression for such a prolonged amount of time, for I had lived under a domineering household full of abuse and mortal astonishments, the constant threat of being locked in a mental ward for my sorrow. In reality, being locked up for 3 years during my youth, coming back to the household, the need to comprehend and overcome this reality. The result, after 18 years under their rule, just this year I left them for good, and reality has hit me. Just how difficult it is to adjust to the world without the commanding fear of patriarchal rule overshadowing me. The greatest advice I tell myself is to obscure this, to forget about my experience, to not think about even my own past, especially if it is so very painful. It is not healthy. A simple friendship can help. I was always made fun of by the males during high school. For me, I was a goat. There were problems with this. I remember a photograph of a unique, reasonable man with a member wearing a trench coat. I thought that he was so extreme. I eventually bought a trench coat one day. It was neck to ankle and jet black. I wore it to high school back in 10th grade, along with this ridiculous vampiric makeup and general satanic jewelry. I even applied these black, lengthy acrylics to my nails. I appeared this way almost every week throughout the remainder of that sacrilegious year, stubborn in ever impertinence of stepping down from my extremity. No photographs exist of me in this particular outfit. Thus later I became ever the more radical in desires to photograph myself, over time appearing in more and more ridiculous and fanciful satanic vampiric extremist expressions, to satisfy that reluctantly unquenchable desire to preserve an unknown and otherwise forgotten identity, that which is to me, and if to others, an expression wholly unique and original. As though in my mind I could imagine certainly and finally put to rest that gaping error that irresponsibly occurred, that of a very unique youthful year, standing apart almost totally and absolutely from all others, never to be truly documented and captured for time and memory in picturesque form. In any event, there were these males at the school that made persistent fun of me. The kids had laughed at me, and I was during the time in denial. The more I dressed up, the more laughter and scorn I received. I stood apart from the crowd so much, looking up to the males, the patriarch archetype, for approval. They laughed at me instead of fearing me, as how I wished it, and thought it only reasonable. That was when I wanted back during the days with my Kopecky Walker parents. I'd wanted to be feared in order to somehow, though not likely, overcome my eternal thirst to justify revenge for my world. For, in all honesty, nothing but the blackest domination of spirituality in general, for this subject represents the mother archetype, would not even restore what was ravaged by how she sent me into this world, as the grave but immortally wise Heimdaller's son would more or less state, as what I would come to know and experience this world as during my horrific and surprisingly terrible youth, as well to couple this with the unalterable inherited disposition, which is terribly cold and grave to begin with, however gratefully, even mercifully blessed with both a sharp intellect and a very creative drive as well. All of my experience inevitably led me to the deepest comprehension of truth and reason, an ultimately rewarding experience, a disclosure of will, character, and intellect, mad, wise, and genuine enough to achieve true and final liberation. My pirate job seemingly screwed me over, leaving me no break. I needed a break, but couldn't. I was the only clerk. It was a full-time position. I worked as a sheet music clerk at the piano and organ warehouse. It paid decent, but during the final days I had worked, I was exhausted. My life, I hope, is currently so and so. I'm lonesome and fearing criticism from others. Late November 2006. 13. How I came to be. I had fallen near asleep last night, lost in thoughts. It was around 4 in the morning, and I forced myself awake to write down my thoughts during the moment, what I had been thinking during my sleep. The following is the result. The writing deals with reason to the core, concerning who I am, insofar as experience and stimulation is concerned. Inborn, a priori, inherited character, and intellect in this case are eliminated over elsewhere. The following was written. Reality, destiny, to become a famous concert pianist, grow older, hear the word talented, be convinced, the conviction becomes reality, feels real. High-class mother, divorce, high-class rational father, new father, solution needed to be, high-class rational sentimental father. Reality, choice of mother, marry, lower-class man, he becomes more or less my father. Mother, remain married to lower class man throughout. Me, age 9 onward. Mother must have instead marry high class rational sentimental father. I, when we're a youth, equals confusion, outburst. Remove from mother must stay with high class rational father. Sole parent, long stay. Sadism. I regard him equals severe fear. He himself equals confused. I equal unloved. Mother's love absent. Destiny not reality. Now live alone. Reality equals forever without mother's love. No resolve. Conclusion. Effect. Logic obscurity. Stem from forever unresolved role confusion. Chronic thought. November 14, 2006. 14. Survival technique. One must always be prepared in life. This goes without saying. If on the way to a location there are passages during the journey without the usual comforts for humanity, in which the passages are sparse of civilization, if the car breaks down, or you survive a plane crash, there's not a phone or any means of contact for rescue, then there must be an instance where you will have to make it back to civilization on your own. You must remember ahead of time on a journey to bring kit with you, the most important consisting of kits for survival, first aid, There are no environments on Earth where man is devoid of his chance to survive. You have to remain strong. It is important in life to have practiced meditation regularly. It is even more important to be physically fit and in shape. Also to have consumed a diet that produces strength, energy, and stamina. Check nutritional facts on foods, which ones supply proteins, carbohydrates, fats. When night falls, it may become cold enough to die from it. You must learn to make a fire. The fire is used for cooking, as a signal for rescue, and will boost the morale of your situation. When night falls, many dangerous animals are around, and you will need to keep safe when asleep. You must learn to build a shelter. When out in the wild, you will need to, as soon as possible, locate water. Find a creek or river and scoop the water into a container and boil it to remove any parasites or bacterium. Also, when out in the wild, you will need to find a source of food. However, this is not as important, as a human could last only 3 days without water, yet can last weeks without food. You must keep your diet balanced, even when stranded and forced to survive alone. Dieting on one food source alone may keep you from hunger, but without warning, you may die from a lack of other vital nutrients. You're fortunate to be omnivorous, for you are able to both gather plants as food and at the same time hunt for food. Yet during an unusual lack from these sources, insects remain an exceptional source of protein. Remember that it is a must to remain mentally strong, as the discipline will give you the ability to consume worms, snails, termites, etc. The main regions likely to be stranded within would be the polar, evergreen, rainforest, mountain, marsh, island, coastal, and oceanic regions. The climates are different, and hence the survival methods are different. Remember also to deploy your knowledge of technique concerning rescue. Start a fire on a hill clear from shrubbery. Gather logs, stones, and arrange them to depict SOS and help signs. Blow a whistle, scream for help, etc. The longer you remain confident, the longer you live. The sooner you lose confidence, the sooner you die. November 27, 2006. 15. Symphony. It is complete. Yes, please check it out. Tell me what you think. Also, a heads up, musically I would have been satisfied with the work much more than I am. Unfortunately, this is if A. Samuel Barber hadn't written the Adagio for strings, and B. Platoon and the music score hadn't become popular. During the finale of the symphony, the music seems to keep a similar approach to Barber's magnum piece. When I noticed this mistake during the performance, I became aware that this would seem I'm ripping off the piece, and I approached the next moments to the section as originally as I could, and was able to. Haha, damn. Fortunately, the music shifts course afterward to more original ideas. Anyway, good evening to you, and wish a Merry Christmas. Wish a Merry Christmas. Wish a Merry Christmas. December 26, 2006. 16. Legend of Steinheimer. Later 2006 notes, the following are 2 stories from part of a horror series that I had written from around 2003 to 2004. The first story given here is 3rd part of the series. The second story, 4th part of the series. August 25, 2012 notes, another later developed story, 5th part of the series, the Putreface Slaughterhouse Mutilation. As well as the penultimate story, 9th part of the series, Putreface Chamber of Nightmare, are documents 17 and 18 below this entry. Unfortunately, not all of the stories to the series are preserved anymore. I remember that there are exactly 9 of them in total. A few of them, particularly the later stories in the series before the penultimate story, of which concerning this one, the penultimate story, there's an easily observed toning down of the madness and hilarity. But a few of them that are lost, particularly concerning the 6th, 7th, and 8th parts, were, in my belief, almost totally and absolutely heinous and cruel. My life during this general time was utmost bizarre and disturbing, beyond comprehension. I'm showing this story on here with some warning, for if one is faint of heart or disgusted easily. I also preserve these couple of stories here as a basic and general idea of what my gore poems and writings consisted of. As I feel today, I'm being a bit mellow. The stories present some flaws and are considered quite amateur, though they are written here for the sake of nostalgia. And here it is, the rare chance to read the virtually unheard of horror stories. The first one here is entitled The Steinheimer Cannibal Incident, Part 3, written more or less during 2003 or 2004, at around the age of 16, 17. It is already a part of a few number of stories about Steinheimer, thus written around during this time. This particular story is dedicated to the movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. 12 December 2007, Manchester, England. What appears to be an abandoned house is nothing short of actually a tale of a madman and his accomplice. The legend that has been alive since 1988 until 2004. 3 years later, it happens again. The Louisville cannibal incident that haunted the small town in rural Nebraska has now become a legend after what they thought had happened, that Steinheimer had died. He is alive. The Steinheimer Cannibal Incident, Part 3. Is the true reality that one dares to think about. Steinheimer's accomplice, whom is referred to as Mikhail, through Steinheimer's words only, was last known in the years between 1988 and 2004 to be completely mute and absent of all known human elements and characteristics. The same appears to be of him in this year. He is a sitting log that does not register any human thought processes or experience any sense of recognition of his surroundings. He is a barbaric creature whose only use in life is to eat, sleep, and excrete. Steinheimer is a man that always seems to speak his demented beliefs to Mikhail, a madman that seems to take advantage of the useless heap of flesh only when deemed necessary for covering up his crimes. The sights of the interior of the house are chilling at first glance. One must realize that after the incident with 3 high school children in 2004, he and Mikhail were forced to abandon their location on grounds for the CIA's suspicion of murder and unspeakable acts of mutilation and macabre. The skeletons in the cages are in fact real. The heads in the glass jars are not fake. 3 of the skeletons in these cages were, at one point, the mangled and mutilated remains of Ben, Stephanie, and Melissa. Amy's head is still preserved today in a glass jar. What began one day with a British woman carelessly walking to Steinheimer's mansion turned out to be a gruesome tale of dismemberment and nightmarish amputation. Annoyingly ringing the doorbell, the woman waits to be greeted by a friend, who is in fact nothing but the throes of hell and perdition. The house appears to be abandoned by her senses, hence she alone opens the door. She's amazed at what she sees. She wonders if the skeletons are real. She's wandering around the kitchen area in total disbelief. The house is silent. No one appears to be home. Just then Mikhail emerges from his habitual trance-like state, sensing an entity in the house. Cautiously walking down the stairs, he glances at the repulsive sight of a female walking in his house, leaving traces of filth and disgust for him to have eternal nightmares over. She falls victim to Mikhail's hideous barbaric appearance. He grabs her neck and strangles her. She is thrown to the ground by Mikhail's utmost brutal power. Her facial expression is frozen stiff in a horrified manner. Her face forever remains blue, oxygenless, without a breath of life left in her dead soul. Mikhail picks up her remains and brings her over to the carving table. There he carves her into slices along the length of her body, then along the width, dicing her into hundreds of pieces. All the while, this man never registers a sense of disgust for his actions. He heaps her severed head and, as usual, places it in a glass jar with chemical preservatives to forever keep the flesh intact and not to decompose and putrefy. Her head is placed in the jar. Her body is eaten by Mikhail. Pus, bile, and bodily fluids splatter the floor to his left as he eats the remains of her torso. Flies and gnats, maggots and insects accompany him in his feast on the woman's guts and brains. A man that has digested the human anatomy is a man that must be feared. The house is silent. Days will pass before the woman's friends and relatives notice her disappearance. But where will they trace her path? Steinheimer's mansion is never suspected. Steinheimer awakens from sleep, not knowing the cannibalistic incident has even occurred. He walks down the steps, smelling the scent of putrefaction, bile, pus, inner organs, and blood. The head of a woman is floating in the glass jar. It looks new, a gruesome sight of diced human meat and flesh, cooked into a meal on plates swarming with maggots and flies. The house reeks of putrescence. A puddle of human fluid lies on the ground. Steinhammer is furious that he could not be a part of this. Jealous of Mikhail's tally of murders, Steinhammer now leaves the house to search for his victim. He plans to murder as brutal as possible to compensate for Mikhail's murder, so he can never be matched in competition for utmost brutality and extremity. The following is a Steinhammer cannibal incident in Manchester, England. Steinhammer then sets off for the famous Innsbruck pub, downtown Manchester. The place is perfect. A restaurant which Steinhammer will use to stalk a woman speaking to her friends with. A bar and dance floor which Steinhammer could use to sedate a woman and get her to go to his home. Game rooms, etc. Those which have no value to Steinhammer. He carefully sets his eyes on a highly attractive blonde woman who happens to be very young, a pleasing trait for Steinhammer's appeal. He orders a drink, subtly keeping an eye on her. She doesn't know it, but Steinhammer is actually following her everywhere she goes. He observes her movements and finds her attractive and seductive. He first hears her voice when she tells something to the waiter while handing him the menu. He finds it pleasurable. He watches her eat. She remarks to the guitarist about her boyfriend. He knows this is the perfect one. The meal is now over. She leaves the pub and walks over to the billiard room. He follows her. He watches her interact with someone, listening to her voice, picking up her conversations. She enters the bathroom to wash her hands. He waits outside. After hearing her speak to the janitor of the bathrooms about her telephone number, he quickly memorizes it, leaves the building only to invite her over, claiming to be her boyfriend, saying that he would be at a different house to meet with her on that night. So he begins the massacre. He claims to her on the phone that he was sick with laryngitis. That excuses his voice from sounding different from her boyfriend's. He tells her that he was at a party at a friend's house, really in fact Steinhammer's place. He gives her directions to meet with him. Now he waits for her to arrive. She walks up to the house, guessing she's at the right place. Odd, she thinks. Duke never goes to parties. Nonetheless, she rings the doorbell, expecting a response. All's quiet in the house. She expects the house to be loud with party music and people. Nothing. She waits for a while outside, not thinking about entering the unlocked door. But time progresses, and as no one answered, she now curiously enters the door to the mansion. She opens the door and walks inside. A scream is heard from inside the mansion. The house is unfortunately built in a remote area. No citizen ever hears her cry for help, and no one is able to come rescue her. Inside, she stops to stare at the filth and foulness that the house's conditions are currently in. It smells of rotting meat. She is unaware of the scent of putrefaction. The meat on the plates looks like beef or pork, while the puddle of bodily fluid secretions appears unidentified to her. It is still too much for her mind. She is now pondering where Duke, her boyfriend, could be, or why, in fact, he would be playing tricks on her. She cannot seem to answer these questions herself. Night creeps onto the mansion. After leaving the sight of the filth and disgust she saw on the dining table, she hears a noise upstairs. Someone is up there. She calls out Duke's name, expecting him to answer. She walks upstairs, waiting to find him. She's upstairs on the second floor. All is silent. The entire floor is empty of guests. No party or Duke can be found. She checks the room in front of her, a darkened bedroom. She becomes frightened, thinking that she is in the wrong house. She quickly begins to leave. She leaves to go down the stairs and begins to run. Steinhammer now knows it's time for the kill. He bursts out of a room suddenly and wildly runs downstairs. She just about makes it out of the door when Steinhammer catches her and pulls her inside. She screams and begs to be let go. He pushes her inside and prepares to feast on her alive. She is murdered by Steinhammer's knife, stabbed over 100 times and thrown into one of his cages. Just then, Mikhail waddles down the stairs and lunges at Steinhammer with a knife. He shoves him in a corner and begins stabbing him mercilessly until all of Steinhammer's blood ejaculates from his veins and arteries. After the job is complete, Mikhail stands experiencing something he has never experienced in his life before, the emotion of pride. He is, in fact, so excited about the successful rebellion of his oppressor that he leaves Steinheimer's body to rot and decompose on the ground until he remains as a mere skeleton of his former being. The mind of Mikhail is a brutal mind. Too much abuse experienced by him has led to a permanent reality, to permanent personality of self-defeating behavior, which causes his utmost submission to a greater being that Steinheimer has emulated for such a long time. Oppressed for his entire life by persons who all seem much greater and more powerful than he, has led to his silence, and the rituals that he has went through in his mind, visualizing the abuse he experienced and the trauma that he underwent. Caused his eternal catatonic states, never having the full power to pull out of them. The murder of his most recent victim caused a humanly experienced feeling that he had never felt before his self-deterioration, the feeling of tension, which was caused by Steinheimer's jealousy of Mikhail, somehow always seeming to make much more brutal and powerful attempts at preserving his reputation than Steinheimer's mere socio-political beliefs and stalking behavior. This caused Mikhail's mind to seizure from his state and kill his superior without any justification. It was in fact the emotion that Mikhail felt, the only emotion that he felt for such a long time, that broke his mind and caused a desperate attempt to regain the usual way of life, which was, in his corrupt eyes, the way of killing the cause of the emotion he felt, killing Steinheimer and leaving him there as a dead body on the floor to decompose and be eaten by insects and maggots into the remains of a skeletal figure, the figure that represents Mikhail's trophy of triumph, his true one and only feeling of pride and honor, the emotion that he has longed to experience for such a long time, to destroy his oppressors, crush the persecutors of his conscience, and hold the tangible sign of victory over the bodies of his enemies, to prove the eternal glory of successful rebellion that he always so wished to fulfill. Mikhail has triumphed the nightmares of Steinheimer. It is over. The killings have ended. Mikhail now waits in the house to die of starvation, for he has no source of food. It is too much for him to live, so he dies. It is now the end. He lies dead on the ground and decomposes. Steinheimer is now a skeleton. The house, full of putrefaction, invaded by insects, is abandoned for years in the rural, remote area of Manchester, English. It is the story of a madman and his accomplice, the beginning and the end. The end has come, it is now over. It is to be known forever as the Steinheimer Cannibal Incident. The end. Later 2006, note, following this is the story written just after the Steinheimer Cannibal Incident Part 3. This story was written during relatively the same time, around the age of 16-17. This story is dedicated to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. To Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.